So can the Minister outline to my constituents how this government's tackling that illegal working to make sure that we can have safe spaces for these people in the jobs in our vital tourism industry?
Mr. Speaker, we are tackling it by increasing enforcement significantly, which is why we've had a 40% increase in visits and a 42% increase in the number of arrests for illegal working. There are fines of £60,000 per illegal worker discovered, and those who are discovered working illegally can be arrested and get on the route to deportation.
Surely the best way to tackle illegal working is to make more legal opportunities. The Island of Strangers immigration policy is going to have huge issues for the workforce in Scotland, with the care service saying it could threaten the whole sector. Meanwhile, asylum seekers waiting for their cases to be processed are in effect an unused resource. So why not shorten the time asylum seekers have to wait to be allowed to work to help bring some relief to these sectors?
Mr. Speaker, we're shortening the time that it takes to process asylum claims by getting the system we inherited from the party opposite working again, which is why there's been a 63% increase in the number of initial claims processed following the 70% fall in the period before the last election.
Sorry, Graham Stewart.
12, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Child sexual exploitation and abuse are the most horrific crimes, and the government is taking decisive action to ensure victims and survivors of grooming gangs get the justice that they deserve. That is why we are delivering on the key recommendations of the 7-year independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, including mandatory reporting, why we've asked all police forces in England and Wales to review historic cases where no further action was taken to reopen investigations, and why we have commissioned Baroness Louise Casey to conduct a national audit into the nature and scale of grooming gangs and the offending in this country. We will leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of truth and justice.
Graham Stewart.
Senior figures in the Catholic Church and the Church of England were found to have conspired to cover up child abuse by priests. Senior figures in the Labour Party are now opposing local inquiries in places like Bradford, London and Wales, and ministers here oppose a national rape inquiry. We've also heard, Mr. Speaker, from a former member of this House, Simon Danchuk, Labour Member of Parliament, that he was told not to raise this issue of the ethnicity of some of the perpetrators. When will Labour put aside its electoral interests and stand on the side of the abused?
Minister.
I think that the idea that I have ever, or in fact the Prime Minister of this country, has ever put anything other than the interests of the victims of grooming gangs at the heart of everything that we have ever worked for is, frankly, Mr. Speaker, for the birds. We have increased the number of arrests of the perpetrators who the honourable gentleman is talking about, and we will continue to pursue these violent, abusive, vicious abusers through the courts, through justice, and I will continue to take my counsel, not from him, but from the victims in this country.
Embarrassing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 15.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, settlement in the UK is a prerequisite for becoming a British citizen and also an important step in integrating and contributing to local communities in the country. The White Paper proposes an expansion of the points-based system, increasing the standard qualifying period for settlement to 10 years. Individuals will have the opportunity to reduce the qualifying period based on their contributions to UK economy and society. We will be consulting on the Earned Settlement Scheme later this year. We will provide details of how the scheme will work after that, including on any transitional arrangements for those already in the UK.
Oleg Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for her answer. Carmela moved to the UK in 2021 as a skilled worker within my Oxfordshire constituency of Didcot and Wantage. They worked to research, to discover novel drugs for diseases with no current treatment, and are an additional rate taxpayer and has made many professional and personal ties here. The sudden increase to the qualifying period from 5 to 10 years has plunged hard-working people like Kamala into uncertainty about their future. So will the Minister meet with me to understand the impact of the policy, not just on workers like Kamala, but on the government's wider science and research objectives?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Member for his questions, and indeed these are important changes, and we recognise how important this is to people, and we will listen to what people tell us in that consultation. We will be providing details of how the scheme will work after that, including on any transitional arrangements for those already in the UK.
Chris Vance.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I was asked by my constituent Emily to raise this issue in the House only yesterday, so I'm taking the first opportunity to do so. Emily is a carer and has cared for a number of people across the Harlow community. Can I ask, when looking at this consultation for the early settlement scheme, we take into account the hugely important role that carers sometimes overseas do to support the most vulnerable in our communities?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. Indeed, carers do play, and those who have come from overseas, of supporting us, our families, our communities, in the important work that they do. He will also recognise that it is important, as I've referenced, for us to make sure that people's voices can be heard in this consultation. We do recognise that settlement is an important step in integrating and contributing to local communities and wide families. Under the current system, settlement is primarily qualified for on basis of length of time in the UK, but we do also believe that people should be contributing to the economy and society before gaining settled status in our country.
Lisa Smart, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Mr Speaker, another group for whom the Immigration White Paper is creating uncertainty is refugee families. Family reunion is a vital route in which refugees can safely reach the UK free from the grasps of criminal trafficking gangs. The government should be looking for more ways to facilitate refugee family reunion, not hinder it. But it's unclear how the Immigration White Paper reforms on English language requirements will apply to refugee family reunion. Can the Minister acknowledge the needs of this unique and vulnerable group? And is she able to provide clarity on what level of English language proficiency people applying for refugee family reunion will be expected to have once these reforms are implemented?
I thank the Honourable Member for her question, and she will know that in the Immigration White Paper we have referenced that we will be looking at reform of the family rules and that we will be consulting on that.
David Simmons, Topicals.
Number one, Mr Speaker.
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I first pay tribute to the first responders, the police, ambulance, fire service and others who dealt with the horrific incident at the Liverpool parade, some of whom I met last week. I know the thoughts of the whole House will be with those who were injured and affected. The House will also have seen the disgraceful and unacceptable small boat crossings on Saturday. No one should be making these journeys. Criminal gangs will likely have made millions of pounds this weekend alone. The gangs are increasingly operating a model where boats are launched from further along the coast and people climb in from the water, exploiting French rules that have stopped their police taking any action in the sea. This is completely unacceptable. The previous government raised this with France for years, but to no avail, and I have raised it with the French government since the summer. The French Interior Minister and the French Cabinet have now agreed their rules need to change. A French maritime review is looking at what new operational tactics they will use, and we are urging France to complete this review and implement the changes as swiftly as possible. I've been in touch with the French Interior Minister, who supports stronger action again this weekend, and there are further discussions underway this week. I will update the House in due course.
Simmons.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On Friday in my constituency, I met the leader of Hillingdon Council, which hosts 3,000 asylum seekers with Home Office accommodation, the most per capita of any local authority in the country. He told me that the council faces a £5 million per annum funding shortfall, more than its entire libraries and culture budget for supporting asylum seekers. So can she tell me what plans she has to ensure that local authorities are reimbursed in full for the role that they play in supporting asylum seekers in this country?
Well,
The honourable member raises an important point. We did inherit an unacceptable asylum backlog, including huge and unacceptable bills for asylum accommodation. We have already brought the bills for asylum accommodation down, saving hundreds of millions of pounds already, with hundreds of millions of pounds more to be saved in the course of this year, as a result of the action that we are taking to clear the backlog which the previous government left us with. As part of that, we are working with MCHLG on how to coordinate support for local councils.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Crawley is home to the Tinsley House and Brook House immigration removal centres and their associated scandal. Could I ask the Minister what consideration is being given to the Home Affairs Select Committee's inquiry on immigration detention, including the end of the use of these centres for indefinite detention?
Minister.
The immigration centres are not used, Mr. Speaker, for indefinite detention. We can only keep anyone in detention in an immigration centre if there's a reasonable prospect of their removal. If there isn't, then they have to be released.
Right, we come to Shadow Home Secretary Criswell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I join the Home Secretary in paying tribute to the people and emergency services in Liverpool. This year so far has been the worst in history for illegal immigrants crossing the Channel on this Home Secretary's watch. The government's laughable claim to smash the gangs lies in tatters. They're not smashing gangs, they're smashing records. Now, you mentioned the French prevention rate on land is lamentably under 40%, and even those stopped are then released to attempt a crossing again the next day. And although she talks about action at sea, nothing has happened whatsoever. We saw those pictures at the weekend of French police just standing there, taking photographs while illegal immigrants departed. So, does the Home Secretary agree the recent 12-year fishing deal should be suspended until the French agree to stop those small boats at sea and prevent illegal immigration?
Home Secretary.
Well, I would obviously remind the Shadow Home Secretary that when he was Immigration Minister, he said, "I will continue to push my French counterparts to look hard at interceptions at sea." But 5 years of Conservative government later, the French government hadn't agreed to any changes at all. This government has reached a new agreement with France, and we're now pressing for that to be operationalised as swiftly as possible. But we won't take lessons from a former immigration minister who let legal migration treble and small boat crossings soar more than tenfold on his watch.
Criswell.
Illegal immigration levels are at record levels under her watch. As usual, she doesn't answer the question and she doesn't take responsibility. So let's try this instead. It emerged yesterday that the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, chose not to refer a man given just 28 months for rape for a longer sentence under the unduly lenient sentencing scheme, which the Attorney General can do. Yet Lucy Connolly got more prison time for a tasteless tweet. Why does Lord Hermer think rape is less serious than Twitter comments? This is two-tier justice in action. And doesn't this show Lord Hermer has appalling judgment and the Prime Minister should fire him?
Home Secretary.
Well, again, this is from a former policing minister who saw, under his government, saw the charge rates for rape plummet, saw the charge rates for domestic abuse plummet, and saw the charge rates for crime drop substantially. This government is supporting much stronger action on violence against women and girls because we recognise the serious damage that these crimes do. Shamefully, the previous government left us with a shocking legacy on crime, on immigration, across the board. This government's turning that round.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Home Affairs Select Committee, we've heard very worrying evidence about unaccompanied children arriving in this country and being placed in wholly unsuitable accommodation, staying in rooms with adult males, and there are clear safeguarding risks. There are clearly issues about the age assessment process at the border and also the responsibility of those contractors who are organising the accommodation. Can the Home Secretary or the Minister tell the House what steps the government are taking to make sure that children in this country are safe?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when people arrive and claim to be children, there are tests at the border to check whether we think they are. If they are accepted as children, they are put into local authority care and so shouldn't be in asylum accommodation at all. If they are seen to be adults and end up in asylum accommodation, they can always make an appeal to the local authority that they are in and undergo what's known as a Merton age assessment test, which will decide once and for all on their age.
John Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday, 1,200 illegal migrants poured into the United Kingdom by small boats. Many gave spurious reasons to stay here. So when will the government repeal the Human Rights Act for immigration cases and take back control of our borders?
Mr. Speaker, tackling illegal migration means that we have to work across borders in cooperation with other jurisdictions. Were we to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, we could not work with those that sign up to it.
John Morrow.
On Saturday, residents in Westerhope told me how nuisance vehicles, illegally modified e-bikes, off-road bikes, speeding cars are making their lives an absolute misery. And I've had similar complaints from residents in Slateyford and New Biggin as well. The Chief Constable of Northumbria tells me that they have already tripled the number of vehicles that they have impounded over the last 2 years. So they are keen to enforce the laws such as they are. Could the Minister tell me how her new proposals will make life better for residents in Newcastle?
Minister.
I welcome what my honourable friend has said, and this is a problem up and down the land. Clearly, police forces are doing their best at the moment, but the provisions in the Crime and Policing Bill, which will allow them, without having to give any warnings, when a vehicle is being used in an antisocial way, to seize it and then to destroy it, that is the way forward. But I do pay tribute to the work that's already going on with police forces.
Wendy Morton.
Almost a year ago, the Home Secretary has spectacularly failed to put a cap on illegal immigration. She's failed to put in place a deterrent. And after this weekend's record boat crossings demonstrate, she's quite clearly completely failed to take control of our borders. So what can she say in all honesty to my constituents about her plan? Because clearly it isn't working.
So the honourable member's question, given that she was a member of the previous government, might be rather more plausible if she apologised for the 100-fold increase in small boat crossings under her government's watch, and also the quadrupling of net migration as a result of the policies that she supported in government as well. If she wants to support stronger action against illegal migration and the gangs who are organising it, why won't she support the counter-terrorism powers that this government is putting into place to go after them?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of the ban of disposable vapes which came into force this week, could the Minister outline the measures being taken to step up work at the ports, including at East Midlands Airport, to prevent counterfeit and banned vapes from being imported into the country?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. Whilst Border Force does not routinely disclose information of a port-specific nature, for the calendar year of 2024, Border Force seized approximately 300,000 e-cigarettes and vapes at the UK border, and Border Force has a robust approach to seizures based on intelligence received from its partners. This is an issue I know she has raised previously, and I'm very happy to meet her to discuss.
Mr. Speaker, in my Twickenham constituency, we've seen the Parks Police slashed from Bushy Park and theft and knife crimes rates soaring. The Met Police Commissioner warned last week that the Home Secretary won't meet her laudable targets on neighbourhood policing, tackling knife crime and tackling violence against women and girls without additional investment. So can she reassure my constituents, will they see the bobbies on the beach she's promised, or will they only see the Chancellor's iron fist?
Well, I can tell her that in London there will be more than 400 additional neighbourhood police officers on the streets as a result of the neighbourhood policing guarantee that we are introducing, and that will be in the course of this year as a result of the neighbourhood policing guarantee.
Julia Mims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's an increasing concern in my Carlisle constituency that a number of delivery riders are subcontracting to unregistered delivery riders, some of whom are working illegally. Can you say what? Can the Minister say what is being done to crack down and ensure that all delivery riders are registered and are not here working illegally?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There is an amendment to the Border Security Bill which extends the illegal working requirements of checking to the gig economy, the zero-hours economy, and all of those areas that are non-traditional employer-employee relationships. And I look forward to being able to operationalise that when the bill becomes law.
Mr McVeigh.
Police time taken to investigate them, doesn't the Minister agree with me that the clue is in the name, non-crime, and that already stretched police should focus their efforts on tackling real crime, rather than being the virtue-signalling thought police?
Minister.
As the Home Secretary has been very clear about the priorities that police forces should be actually looking at and focusing on. Now, as agreed with the Home Secretary, the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing are currently conducting a review of non-crime hate incidents, and we will update Parliament in due course on the findings of that review and any changes that may be required to the current Code of Practice introduced by the Shadow Home Secretary in March 2023.
Pedro.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Doncaster East Neighbourhood Policing Team recently seized multiple stolen off-road bikes using tactics including drones and high-visibility patrols. Their swift action has made a real difference in tackling antisocial behaviour in places like Hatfield and Dunscroft. I commend their work and the public support they've received through their Where's That Bike campaign. In light of these, can I ask the Minister about progress around the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee and when Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme can see named police officers in their towns and villages?
Can I welcome the work that South Yorkshire Police have been doing and the Doncaster East Neighbourhood Policing Team going after the off-road bikes which just cause havoc and are a total nightmare in the community. They are also getting additional neighbourhood police as part of the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee, and we will give them stronger powers to keep the streets safe.
Shocker Adam.
Mr Speaker, Leicestershire Police have signed a reported £800,000 contract with Palantir, a company that has a worrying history of racial profiling and surveillance concerns in the USA, and have now since removed all the contract details from public record. The Home Office also holds no central records of such a deal. So what reassurances can the Home Secretary give that the people of Leicester are protected from intrusive and discriminatory policing practices, and how can transparency and oversight be upheld in such partnerships where no central records are kept?
I wondered if the honourable gentleman might wish to write to me with the details of what he's outlined, and I will look at it.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to personally thank the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister for visiting my Liverpool Riverside constituency last week after the horrific incident after the Liverpool Football Club's victory parade. Will the Home Secretary join me in congratulating the emergency services for acting so swiftly, but also condemning the Reform UK Party and the far right for trying to stoke up hatred? And can the Home Secretary explain how her department will tackle this misinformation to prevent further actions forward?
Home Secretary.
Can I join with my honourable friend in saying a huge thank you to all of the first responders, those that I met last week, but many more who were involved in a very swift response which undoubtedly saved lives that day. It was a day of huge joy across the city of Liverpool that ended up with the horrific incident. But I know from her constituency and across Liverpool, it is a city where communities come together in the face of the greatest difficulties and show their strength as a community.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Karen Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I draw the Home Secretary's attention to the amendment I have tabled to the Crime and Policing Bill, which would see the definition of exploitation in the Modern Slavery Act extended to include orphanage trafficking. This is a horrific crime. It affects about 5 million children across the world, and it's something we do need to recognise in our legislation.
Sorry.
I know the Chair of the Select Committee has raised a very important point. I know she also has a strong interest going back many years and has taken strong action herself on modern slavery. We will look at the amendment that she has proposed and happy to discuss it with her further.
Claire Hazelgrove.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. Last week, my whole community was shocked and appalled to hear about the stabbing of a 15-year-old boy in Cribbs Causeway. Thankfully, he is stable, and I know we'll all be thinking of him and his family at this time. 3 16-year-old boys have been charged. Could the Minister please set out what steps the government is taking to tackle knife crime, including among young people who could have much brighter futures?
Home Secretary.
I do convey all thoughts to the family of the victim in this awful stabbing case and all of those affected across the community. And she's right to raise the real deep concerns about the number of young people getting drawn into serious violence that we are seeing across the board. It's why the Young Futures Prevention Programme is so important and why we need to work to prevent this with strengthening the law on child criminal exploitation.
As I speak, there is a removal van outside the illegal immigrant hotel in my constituency. Let's hope they're moving them out and not moving more in. Can the Secretary of State assure my constituents that these illegal immigrants are not being dispersed in the community, being housed in HMOs owned by private landlords, and will she advise me where they will be housed? Thank you.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, anyone who's in a hotel is someone who's claimed asylum and having their asylum claims pending of being dealt with. They are not necessarily at all illegal immigrants, and the honourable lady should make that position clear.
Jane Kirkham.
Dr Mohammed Mohsen was offered a position in the acute medicine department at Royal Cornwall Hospital in my constituency. He was due to start this role last year. However, due to the ongoing conflict and travel restrictions in Gaza, he's been unable to travel to the UK. Would the Minister meet with me to consider his case as he requires urgent assistance to say...
I thank my honourable friend for raising this. I'm very happy to meet her. The FCDO is working to seek to ensure that those who are able and need to leave Gaza, who are eligible to do so, are supported in that. And I'm very happy to look at this matter with her.
Sir Julian Lewis.
The Home Secretary was asked a question about Lord Hermer of Chagos, as perhaps he ought to be known. Why didn't she answer it, and will she do so now?
Lord Hermer does not decide sentencing. He has a particular role as the Attorney General that the honourable member has been, as a very experienced member of this House, will know the way in which the system works.
Alfred Tuffle, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent roundtable on violence against women and girls, hosted by the Mayor of West Yorkshire, we heard from local organisations who do outstanding work but are hampered by short-term funding, as well as a brave survivor who shared her experiences. They specifically asked for the government to commit to strategic investment. So will the Minister review contracts with the sector so they are multi-year and take a long-term view on service delivery and preventative work?
Minister.
I thank the honourable lady for her question, and she makes a very important point that short-term funding hampers the sector massively. And what I will say, whilst the vast majority of violence against women and girls funding comes from local authorities and in fact from other government departments, I will absolutely commit to looking at how the Home Office manages our contracts to ensure that sustainability is in place.
Right, let the front benches change over. Before we come to the next business, I have a brief statement. This morning, the Government published the Strategic Defence Review. The Prime Minister made a speech and held a press conference in Glasgow, in addition to other media appearances. This follows several days of media briefing. I am disappointed once again the Government appears to have breached the principle set out in paragraph 9.1 of the Ministerial Code. That, when a Parliament is in session, the most important announcements of government policy should be made in the first instance in Parliament. I recognise that the timing of policy announcement is not always wholly within the government's control. There may be a need to coordinate announcements on international trade with trading partners, for example, or announcements may be delayed by last-minute legal intervention. But the announcement of the SDR was wholly within the government's discretion, and highly regrettable that ministers have chosen once again to hold major event before coming to the House. This shows complete disregard for the House and for the honourable members. I note that ministers, when they were in opposition, were not slow to complain when the previous government made major policy announcements outside Parliament. In fact, the SDR was due in Easter, so I'm sure a day wouldn't have mattered. I'm not responsible for the compliance of with the Ministerial Code. That is a matter for the Prime Minister. It is the Government's code, not the House. But I regard this particularly blatant breach. I've invited the Honourable Member for North Devon to consider whether the Public Administration and the Constitutional Affairs Committee might usefully inquire into the matter. Also, I find it interesting that elected ministers are elected members of Parliament first, before they get their ministerial roles. So they should recognise the importance of this House. It's amazing in opposition how everything should be discussed on the floor of the House. But when in government, memories are short on that fact. And I do hope that I've been here through many SDRs. In fact, one of the major SDRs with Lord Robertson was we didn't even know the effect on everybody's constituency till it was read out from that dispatch box. What has changed? I'll tell you what's changed. Disregard for the members who sit on the backbenches. I am here to defend the backbenches, so please, I hope we have no more of this. And all I would say is, it is the government's ministerial code. They should be ashamed of not enforcing it. Yeah. Right. We now come to the urgent question. Shall the Leader of the House, Jessie Norman?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that in mind, I ask the Leader of the House if she will make a statement on government announcements outside the House of Commons.
Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hear your statement today. I responded to an urgent question on a similar matter on the 14th of May. I reiterate the commitments I gave then. The Ministerial Code is clear that when Parliament is in session, the most important announcements of government policy should be made in the first instance to Parliament. This is an important principle that this government stands by and upholds. Since that last urgent question on the 14th of May, Mr. Speaker, the government has made a number of important oral statements to the House on the infected blood inquiry, the cross-government review of sanctions implementation and enforcement, the charging of individuals under the National Security Act 2023, the legal aid cybersecurity incident. The Prime Minister updated the House of the 3 trade deals that we have struck in the national interest, the Foreign Secretary on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, the Justice Secretary responding to the sentencing review, the Defence Secretary on the future of the Diego Garcia military base. And this afternoon, the full conclusions of the important Strategic Defence Review will be published and laid before this House first, with a significant statement from the Defence Secretary to follow. I am satisfied that this government is coming to the House regularly to keep Parliament informed. I recognise...
Order! I'm not satisfied. I think that's the key, because both backbenchers, quite rightly, should hear it first. I don't care how many have been done in the House, it's the ones that's not been done we should be talking about. Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I say, it will be made this afternoon by the Defence Secretary, and I am satisfied. I recognise there are times when we make a judgment on when an oral statement is needed, balancing the rest of the day's business and other factors. But in almost all instances, a written statement is also made, and this is an appropriate mechanism of updating the House. As well as 153 oral statements in this session, we've also made 673 written statements in this session. As I said before recess,
The code does make clear that when Parliament is in session, announcements should be made to the House. And I would gently point out that as of an hour ago, we had only just returned from recess. And prior to recess, we were at pains to ensure the House got updated on the Diego Garcia military base before the House adjourned. Mr Speaker, I and the Government take our obligations to Parliament very seriously, and I will continue to work with you and colleagues across the Government to ensure that important announcements are made to the House and that MPs from across the House have ample time to consider issues and ensure that the Government is effectively scrutinised.
Shall I leave the House, Jessie Norman?
I mean, really, Mr Speaker, is this the best the leader can do? A kind of I speak your weight auto-cue recitation of points that she's made in the 3 previous attempts on which this House has been recently embarrassed and disregarded just over the last 3 weeks alone. It is both a hopeless miscue of a response and bordering on a contempt of Parliament itself. Yet another attempt to change the subject, blame others and distract attention from the latest fiasco. Evidently, the defence of the realm is not important enough to merit making its way up the list of priorities in the government's media handouts. Lord Robertson himself, as you have said, Mr Speaker, and I'm amazed that you had to intervene on the leader in her own remarks, would be ashamed and embarrassed to think this was being done in his name. Just 3 weeks ago, the leader had to be dragged to the Commons over the government's briefing of the immigration white paper outside this House. That came just days after it did the same thing on prisoner recall and the UK-US trade deal and, of course, the Chagos Islands. And that followed tuition fees, planning reforms and even the fiscal rules on which you, Mr Speaker, had to reprove and chastise the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now we have the unhappy sight of the Secretary of State for Defence no less extensively briefing the media on the decisions to deploy airborne nuclear weapons and build a next generation of submarines before coming to this House. Maybe they weren't important enough, as I say, Mr Speaker, to merit a mention beforehand. Journalists have been able to read the Strategic Defence Review themselves since 10:30 a.m, while the opposition has been prevented until 5 minutes ago, Mr Speaker, from seeing this document, precisely in order to avoid parliamentary scrutiny. All this in manifest breach of the Ministerial Code, the Nolan Principles and, of course, Labour's own manifesto, demonstrating the government's arrogance and complacency, its disdain for this House and for democratic accountability from the leader and, of course, the clue is in the title, the leader of the House, whose job it is to protect and safeguard this House alongside members. Unfortunately, the leader's obvious floundering in her response just now makes the point far better than I can. So I ask, when did she know about these announcements? What steps did she take to prevent the media briefings and have them made to the Commons first? Will she now apologise for yet another high-handed government decision for which she alone is fully responsible in this instance to this House? Leader.
Well, it's nice to see the honourable gentleman in his place respecting Parliament today. It's not always the case. As I've said before, I believe strongly that the government should and has been making the most important announcements to the House when Parliament is in session. We have made more oral statements than the previous government did in their entire last session, I would just remind them. We've made 154 statements in 140 sitting days compared to their 72 in 101 sitting days. And we've made many written statements and answered parliamentary questions. We had the statement on Diego Garcia on the day that the deal was signed, despite the difficulties with the timing. We had a statement on the US economic deal on the day that that deal was signed, and the Prime Minister updated the House after the EU trade deal. And as I have said, the SDR has now been given to the opposition, is being laid before the House. Time for colleagues to scrutinise that and question the Defence Secretary on it to this House this afternoon. The government response to the sentencing review, the Parliamentary Ombudsman's report into the women's state pension age and the upgrade in the defence spending, as well as many other major announcements, were all made to this House first. I am curious, though, whether the shadow leader raised some of these important issues with the previous government when he was a minister or a backbencher, because I remember many occasions when they disrespected this House, and I don't remember his voice at that time.
I remember when the Procedure Committee and I and many others wanted the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, to be accountable to this House of Commons. They did nothing about it, and I don't remember him saying anything about that. I recall the then Culture Secretary announcing the end of the BBC licence fee and separately the privatisation of Channel 4 on Twitter, with no intention of coming to the House to explain these major policy changes. The previous Prime Minister, on the first day of a very long recess, announced he was scrapping the government's net zero targets. He didn't come to the House to explain that. He also announced the scrapping of HS2 during a conference recess and never came to the House to account for it. And one of their other many Prime Ministers made major changes to our way of life during COVID, to the media and not to Parliament, like the 2020 winter lockdown. He didn't come here to talk about that, or the COVID vaccine rollout. And then when he closed the borders and then reopened the borders, to the media, not to Parliament. And let's not forget that, as found by the Supreme Court, Parliament was illegally prorogued by the previous government. And do you remember when the previous Prime Minister was found to have misled Parliament? No greater disrespect to Parliament. And rather than upholding the Ministerial Code, time and time again, they ignored breaches of it, with reports sitting on the Prime Minister's desk, nothing being done about it. We, by contrast, have strengthened the Ministerial Code. Not only did they... He laughs from a 7th position. We have, and we've given the independent advisor on the Ministerial Code the power to instigate his own investigations. There we have strengthened it, yes? He would agree, he doesn't know, yeah. Not only did they disrespect Parliament, they didn't have enough for Parliament to do. They had a threadbare King's Speech with banning pedicabs as a pinnacle of their ambition of the last year in government. And now in opposition, they seem to be carrying on the same, hardly turning up for work. They could have used any one of their opposition days to raise these issues, but they didn't. They've got many other parliamentary devices at their disposal, and they don't do it because they were a zombie government and now they're a zombie opposition. So maybe next time they bring forward an urgent question, they might want to check their own record before giving us lectures on it.
Can I just thank the Leader of the House for reminding me about the mistakes of the previous government not coming to the floor of the House. All I would say is I would have hoped that this government would have learnt from those mistakes that have just been highlighted. To try and defend what you criticise is not a way forward. What I'm trying to do is ensure that members on this side, that, wherever in this House, are allowed to question the ministers first, not to watch on Sky News. The SDR review is quite interesting. The document has been offered to journalists. So, Roger, what are you doing? Has been offered to journalists, yet the members here haven't had the ability to see it, to question. So what I would say is, please, I agree with you, and thank you again for reminding me, but please, let's now show a government that treats this House in the way I expect. Dave Meg-Elliott. No, I won't, because we're going to wait till the end. As you well know, Sir Roger, one of the more senior members. Dave Meg-Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think my right honourable friend is right to remind us of the many breaches of this rule by Her Majesty's opposition, when that party was in government. But let me perhaps shed, in the middle of this mudslinging, a still small voice of calm. It was this current Prime Minister who pledged to be more transparent, more open and more proper in government. And I would ask my right honourable friend to go back to the Cabinet and remind them that proper scrutiny in this House first, untrammelled questions for over an hour or an hour at a time, is more scrutiny than than the government would get in a press conference, and is the proper place to do this. And I hope that she will go back and take that message. So statements like the one we're about to hear next are on the floor of the House first.
Well, can I thank her for that question? And she will know, I'm sure, from the many times that I've said it before, I do regularly remind the Cabinet of this. This is an important aspect of being a Cabinet Minister, or indeed a Minister. That's why we are doing our very best to make sure that there are regular oral statements to this House on important matters, that they are brought here first, and in the absence of an oral statement, that there is a written ministerial statement of which there is notice given the day before, so that colleagues have ample time to, as she says, properly scrutinise all these announcements.
Goldman. Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Mr. Speaker, it is incredibly disappointing to find ourselves here yet again to discuss this issue yet again, but this time on the vital matter of national security and national defence. There was a remarkably similar urgent question before recess. It was disappointing then and now to hear the leader attempt to justify not bringing major announcements to the floor of the House first by citing how many statements the government has already given to Parliament. The Ministerial Code is clear. The government does not get to pick and choose which significant statements they do or do not make to the House. Whenever possible, they should be doing it every single time. And while I agree with the premise of the question from the Shadow Leader, I must say it is a bit rich, given their appalling record of doing exactly the same thing when they were in government. But that doesn't let the current government off the hook. So will the leader please confirm that the government will comply with the Ministerial Code, or shall we expect to do this little dance every week? Surely this time would be better spent making a statement to the House.
Well, can I thank you for that? What I will make no apology for is that we are doing lots of things. We are making lots of announcements. We are delivering the change that the country voted for, and that does bring with it competing demands. As I say, that means that when the House is in session, statements and updates will be made to this House first. Sometimes that would be via written ministerial statement, sometimes it would be by oral statement, depending. And we do have to also balance the rest of the day's business in that regard, which I would point out to colleagues. We've got an important second reading debate today, of which there are dozens and dozens of speakers down to speak in. So we are now doing 2 urgent questions before a very important statement and then other business as well. So we do have to try and balance these things in that interest. But the statement is being made to this House today, and the Defence Secretary will shortly be in his place, and I'm sure we'll spend a long time answering questions on it.
I'm sure that criticism was then to me for granting 2 UQs. The reason we granted 2 UQs, the reason we granted 2 UQs is because we didn't come here with the Strategic Defence Review. Otherwise, we won't be having, and there won't be no pressure on time. Jonathan Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Trust, integrity and transparency must be the watchword of our politics. And that was, they were principles that were worn extremely thin under the previous government. Can the Leader of the House tell us what steps she's taking to redouble our commitment to trust and integrity because our constituents expect that of us?
Well, I do thank him for that question. I do find it slightly strange that the party opposite sort of seem to think that somehow they're now the upholders of parliamentary democracy and standards in Parliament, because some of us have much longer memories than that, I'm afraid. And that's why we are taking steps to raise standards, to raise behaviour, to raise the culture in this House, and indeed to make sure that the House is respected.
Chair of the committee, Simon Hall.
Thank you, Speaker. I think the word the Leader of the House was looking for was sorry. Yeah. Because there is much in this place, as we know, which is complicated and arcane, Mr. Speaker. But the Ministerial Code on this point is crystal clear. The Leader's job is to represent this place and backbenches of all parties around the Cabinet table to make sure that this place hears things first of such vital importance. And as important as public transport is, can I suggest that the defence of the realm is a little more important than the government's bus bill, which will have no divisions this evening? So could the could the Leader of the House please tell us why she thinks number 10 is getting this so wrong, and what she is doing to try to put it right?
Well, look, I'm certainly sorry if members of the media have been given sight of the SDR ahead of members of this House. It is being, my understanding is being published for the first time in this House today. And as I said earlier, we have put on a statement. It was always our intention. We were always obviously going to be putting on a major statement today on the SDR, and that is indeed what we have done. And so MPs, even though there is other important business today, MPs from across this House will have ample opportunity, and I'm sure they will take that opportunity to scrutinise the Defence Secretary, not only today, but on other future occasions as well, and via select committees and elsewhere too.
Chris Lynch.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I declare an interest as a member of the Modernisation Committee. And I thank the Speaker of the House for standing up for us benchers, and someone who speaks in most of them, obviously on behalf of the people of Harlow, for granting so many UQs. Wouldn't the Leader of the House agree with me that part of the remit of this government is to modernise and bring back trust in politics? And to that end, can I ask the Leader of the House if she could outline what she's been doing to that end, and also the work the committee has been doing to make this place more accessible?
Well, can I thank him for all the work that he does on the Modernisation Committee, and he will know that one of the remits that we've set out for that committee is to ensure that there is more time for backbenchers to scrutinise government business. That is a key part of modernising Parliament, but it's also ensuring that this chamber is, and still is in the future, the real crucible of national debate that we want it to be, and I'm sure we'll see that today and on other days.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Knowing the Leader of the House to be a decent person, I suspect that behind the scenes, when events of this sort happen, she probably argues quite strongly that announcements should actually be made to this House first and to the press afterwards. Does she think that the reason why that's not happening is because they genuinely think that it will get less publicity to hold a press conference after there's been scrutiny in the House, or is it that they just have no confidence that they can't stop their people leaking things in advance?
Well, can I thank him for his kind words at the beginning there? And he's absolutely right that part of my job, which I take incredibly seriously, is to uphold this House in government, and that the rest of the government should respect this House and come to this House and be scrutinised and open, transparent and available to this House. It is a message that I relay very, very regularly, and I'm sure I will relay it later today again as well. What I would just gently say to him is that obviously announcements of government do happen outside of Parliament sitting. That's long been the case, and managing those announcements over the course of a few days can often be a challenge. But I would reassure him that on the Strategic Defence Review today, we always were doing the statement to the House today with the publishing and the laying of the 150-page document to this House first. And again, I just reiterate, there is a balance there to be struck, because people want time to have read and digested that before they can actually ask questions to the Defence Secretary, and that's always a balance too.
Mike Martin.
Mr Speaker, it's not just the House as a whole, but also the Defence Select Committee was not given any advance sight of this report. Committee members were left texting journalists over the weekend to find out what was going on. At the beginning of this Parliament, the Secretary of State committed to the Defence Select Committee that he would be more open and more transparent and reset the relationship with the committee. Does the Leader think that the Secretary of State is living up to his commitment to be more transparent by doing what has happened today?
My understanding is we briefed the chair of the Defence Select Committee. That is my understanding. I will stand corrected if that's not the case, that we've offered to do that. But I do hear what he says, and I also think that across government, ministers, civil servants and everybody else need to take their responsibility to select committees also incredibly seriously. They're a very important part of accountability to this House. I know that the Secretary of State for Defence, someone I speak to regularly, takes his responsibilities to this House incredibly seriously, and I'm sure he will look forward to coming before the committee to be questioned and scrutinised at length about the SDR and many other matters.
Sir Ian Duncanson.
Mr Speaker, can I say to the right honourable lady who I've known for a little while that normally when a Speaker upbraids the Leader of the House, the first response of the Leader of the House is to grovel and apologise to the Speaker. That's standard because she has to take it for the party that she represents in government. So I simply suggest, I'm a little surprised that she didn't make that peace with the Speaker. But notwithstanding that, can I just say gently to her, this is not just a case, though, of not having brought it to the House. The reality is that we know now that journalists were given scrutiny of the review. Now, I ask her, therefore, when I was Leader of the House, Leader of the Conservative Party, I remember that then Tony Blair, as Prime Minister, offered me to see documents ahead when they were a bit delicate or needed security clearance, the Leader of the Opposition was given the opportunity to look at those so that they were fully informed of developments. I ask her, was that offered to the Leader of the Opposition or to the Leader of the Liberal Party?
Well, can I thank him? Obviously, if the Speaker hasn't heard me apologise, I do apologise to the Speaker regularly, I have to say, usually in private, but I'm happy to extend that. I'm happy to extend that apology to him today. I absolutely have the utmost respect for Mr. Speaker, who I work very closely with, and I totally respect his job in upholding backbenchers' rights to question and scrutinise government ministers and government policy. That's absolutely what he does brilliantly and is there to do. On the question of Privy Council briefings, I don't know what Privy Council briefings were offered to whom, but I can inquire for him and I will make sure he gets a reply about that.
Kirsty Black.
On the 30th of January, the Leader of the House said we will publish this child poverty strategy in the spring. The Guardian broke the story on the 23rd of May that this child poverty strategy will not be published in the spring. I cannot find a written statement nor indication of an oral statement regarding this delay. Can the Leader of the House let us know whether this announcement will be made, whether the child poverty strategy will be published in the spring, which is now June, so probably not, or whether it's likely to be published in the autumn, just so the House knows.
Well, I know this is a matter of great concern to the Honourable Lady and something that she raises in this House often. I will ensure that she and the House is updated on the timing of the Child Poverty Task Force and that ministers come to this House regularly to update on its progress.
Charlotte Shelton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What troubles me this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, is having this knockabout is that this House has a very important job to do. We are talking about the expansion of nuclear weapons, we assume, because we've not actually read the review, and yet the members of the public, through the newspapers, journalists, have all been given briefing of this, and we wanted to analyse this bill, this review, so that we could ask sensible questions. Now, we are in here for this urgent question, for the next urgent question, for the statement. When does the Right Honourable Lady expect that this House gets a chance to digest this 130-page report before we question the statement? Because everybody else in the country seems to have been able to do it.
Well, look, I recognise these. It's the same with budgets as well. These things are a challenge because you're at the same. I've been on the opposition benches for many years myself, many more years than the honourable gentleman has, and it is a challenge with some of these big statements, big reviews that are laid to the House not long before the statement is being made to properly scrutinise that. I will ensure, and I know the Secretary of State Defence will also want to ensure that today is not the only opportunity. Today is the first opportunity of many to question this government and about its strategic defence review, which is a review that will last for many years to come, and that as further questions emerge today, next week, in months to come, that members of this House will have ample opportunity to put those questions to him.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Integrated care boards had their budgets cut by 50% via a phone call from the interim head of NHS England to ICB leaders. And that announcement was only made formal in response to a written question from myself to the Secretary of State. Half of NHS targets were cut without a statement in the Chamber, and the abolition of NHS England, while there was a statement in the Chamber, has been carrying on at pace without so much as a white paper or a bill on any effective parliamentary scrutiny. I wonder if the Leader of the House would be able to give us an opportunity to look and scrutinise at what is a fundamental reorganisation of the NHS, so far going under the radar.
Well, can I thank you for that? And in issues relating to decisions of ICBs and NHS reorganisation type issues do get raised with me regularly at business questions. She's right to say there was a statement in the House. I can reveal to her, and it probably won't be a surprise to her, that the getting rid of NHS England will require primary legislation. So there will be ample time to consider those issues through the passage of such legislation. But I hear what she says today.
Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's not just giving statements to the media in which this government disrespects the House. Just before we went into recess, we had a farcical situation where the Shadow Secretary of State for Education had to bring forward an urgent question asking for a written statement to be made earlier in the day, where the government very clearly decided to make a written statement later in the day and sent their minister to come and not answer the question for the whole of an urgent question, refusing to say what was the contents of a written statement that they had already written and intended to publish later that day, simply to avoid scrutiny. Can I ask the Leader of the House what representation she made on that day to try and ensure that the information was given to the House in a timely fashion so it could be scrutinised, rather than hiding away?
Well, can I thank her for raising that issue? I think she's talking about the pay review recommendations and the government response to those. And they are issues that I take incredibly seriously to make sure that this House has ample time. So I did go back and look at what is usual practice when it comes to those pay review settlements, because they were across a range of government departments, a number of sectors, not just schools and education, also NHS, MOJ, Cabinet Office, a number of different departments. It is usual practice that those, and it was under her government previously as well, that they're done by written ministerial statements simultaneously in order that all of those are put out at the same time.
In room.
Speaker, I'm sure the Sunday papers would like to thank the government in advance for sight of the upcoming statement. As a member of the Defence Select Committee also, will the Minister acknowledge that this urgent question is actually wasting all our times, because if we had followed procedure and knew about this, the Speaker's quite right in granting this urgent question, is that it's wasting all our time and we could get on and debate about what we've got planned for the rest of the day's business. So does the Minister agree with me that there are few announcements in this Parliament that are so important of our defence strategy going forward? Would she agree with me?
Well, look, if we weren't doing a statement today, I would agree with what he said, but we are doing a statement on the Strategic Defence Review. It's 150 pages long. It will be laid to the House in time for that statement, as would be usual practice. Yes, there were trails of that ahead of time during recess on the Sunday, but the full document, the full conclusions will be laid before this House. As I've said in previous answers, I am sorry that members of the media were given advance sight of that, I understand, in a closed reading room, but publication of the report is to this House this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the weekend, to read about our nuclear defence strategy ahead of the SDR is quite alarming. And also to see this morning that journalists have received all the information and still this side of the House has not had sight of that. I know the Leader of the House is saying she's speaking to Number 10 and Cabinet members saying the importance of that. Did she raise concerns over the weekend when she saw those leaks in the paper?
Leader. Well, look, there were some, I think, some aspects of the SDR that were trailed ahead of time, but not the one that he refers to. That was not something that government was designing to put into the public domain over the weekend. That is normal practice these days. I know we would all like a time when we just did things between when the House is sitting, but things are given to the media sometimes ahead of time. Not the thing that he is the nuclear issue that he's talking about. We've got a further urgent question on that, and then we've got the full Strategic Defence Review statement shortly, where he can ask the Secretary of State for Defence.
Mr. Speaker, the leaders just told us that the journalists were trailed, but at 10:41 this morning, the Daily Telegraph was able to publish a long article in which they clearly set out that they've read the entire document. So what is it that's at 10:41 this morning? And yet, at the same time, the Shadow Secretary of State was refused advance copy of this document, even under Privy Councillor rules. So why is it that the government appears to trust national security to journalists and not to the Shadow Secretary of State?
Look, as I've said in previous answers to questions, I am sorry that members of the media were given a reading room space to look at this SDR before it was laid to the House. That should not have been the case. Other people have asked me about Privy Council briefings. I know which ones I've offered out, and I understand that they were offered to members of the opposition, but I will get for members the full details of who were offered Privy Council briefing and who wasn't.
Wendy Moore.
Mr. Speaker, I fully respect the role of Leader of the House in this place, but I am shocked, but in a way not surprised by what has happened. And the benches opposite are very quiet today, unusual on many of these occasions, and I think they must feel the same that we do, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to ask the Leader of the House 2 questions and perhaps offer her a way of digging herself out of what is an increasingly big hole. One is to offer a fulsome apology to you, Mr. Speaker, and to members of this House. And secondly, to seek reassurances from the Prime Minister that this simply will not happen again.
Well, I think I've made all of those things clear. We are doing a statement today on the SDR. We were always doing a statement today on the SDR. We are laying the report to the House, as is the tradition, as is the convention, as is the right thing to do, to lay it to the House. The Secretary of State will shortly be here, and I'm sure he'll be here for a long time, answering all the questions that people have got. And I will ensure, and I don't need to ask him of this, but I will ensure that he regularly comes to this House to update on aspects of the SDR and how that's rolled out, because it is a document for a long period of time and not one just for today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been very helpful, and I appreciate that in the last few minutes the Leader of the House has confirmed that the media were briefed directly with the contents of the review before this House, and I'm grateful to her for being so honest. I don't think it's enough for her to promise not to do it again. Will she order an inquiry in government about how this decision came to be made, who it was who authorised the briefing of the journalists, and whoever it was needs to come and apologise directly?
I think I was responding to suggestions that they were, and obviously some articles and so on that were read out. As I say, these matters should be coming to the House first. That's why we've got the statement today and shortly, and it was always our intention to do the full statement today and to lay and publish the full report to this House first. And as I said previously, I regret if members of the media were given advance sight of that before members of this House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Eastbourne deserve to have government announcements scrutinised on their behalf by their MP in this chamber before release to the media. To compensate for their shortcomings on this front, will the government commit not only to announcing statements in this House first, but will the Minister also commit to inviting local journalists from the Eastbourne Herald, Eastbourne News, Eastbourne Reporter, Bourne Free to government press conferences of particular interest to Eastbourne so that they can doubly hold government to account on our town's behalf?
Well, look, absolutely think it's vital that MPs, whether they're from Eastbourne or elsewhere, are able to question and scrutinise government ministers on major government announcements. That's exactly what we're trying to seek to do, and that's why we've given so many more oral statements already in this session that's not even a year long yet than the previous government did in their last year in office. Almost double the number of oral statements that the previous government gave. And I'm also very conscious that where announcements have a particular interest for part of the country, that we make sure that local MPs are also told about that in advance.
Jim Austin.
Given the essential lead-in time to organising and perfecting the Prime Minister's visit to Glasgow, where he spoke extensively about these issues, isn't it clear to this House that the government made a deliberate decision to preempt the statement to this House and to show contempt to the processes of this House?
I'm sorry, I don't accept that. This is a big announcement today. We are making this statement to the House this afternoon. The House, as I said earlier, the House was actually in recess until nearly 2 hours ago. We are laying the document to this House. We are not in any way trying to shirk scrutiny or questioning or anything. This is a document we are incredibly proud of. It's the first SDR that's been done in a long time, and it will set out the future of our defence sector for many years to come, and we're really proud of it and proud to lay it before this House this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents will just wonder about a government which promised to do things differently. Said it would be transparent. It said it would be whiter than white. And then it behaves like this. One almost feels sorry for the Leader of the House because she's trying to defend the indefensible. But going back there, it's not enough to express regret that journalists, rather than Privy Councillors or the Leader of the Opposition or the Shadow Secretary of State for Defence, were given access to this document in full before they were given it. It's not enough that this trailing in full should go on days ahead. What we need is action. So will the Secretary of State, further to my honourable friend's question, commit to look into this, whether it's a formal inquiry or not? And secondly, I'd like specific answers to both these questions. Meet one-to-one with the Prime Minister to express her clear opinion that this is not acceptable.
Just to reiterate, because I've got the Defence Minister sitting next to me, members of the opposition benches from the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrat Party were offered briefings this morning. That's what I understand. These could be questions that can be put later. And actually, I'm just hearing for the first time that reading rooms were made available for members of the press on previous SDRs as well. But look, we do take our responsibilities to this House incredibly seriously. We are coming forward with more statements than his government did. We are raising standards in this House when it comes to MPs' behaviours and the code of conduct for members, and that's something that he and I have talked about before, that his government tried to change the rules when one of their MPs was found to have flouted them, and his Prime Minister was found to have been in contempt of Parliament by proroguing Parliament, and was found to have misled, one of the most serious offences a member of this House can commit. His Prime Minister was found to have misled Parliament. We are turning the page on that era, I'm sorry to say. You might not agree with me, but we are, and we do our very best to uphold and respect this House wherever we can.
Go to there. Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the House will be very aware of my complaint at times in this House when matters pertinent to Northern Ireland are announced in the media, and I'm contacted by my Strangford constituency businesses asking me for detail, which is my role as an MP. Indeed, it's all our roles as MP, and I'm unable to provide detail as the media seems to know more than this House. Whilst I acknowledge that sometimes embargo reports are uploaded too quickly, there is clearly more at play, and while this is a political venue, we must never play politics with the rules of this House, which solidified our role as the mother of all parliaments and the home of the democracy rather than a propaganda wing. How will the Leader of the House assure members of this House that their position will be considered rather than timings of the news cycle taking precedence?
Well, he is one of the most formidable constituency MPs in this House, never missing, I don't think, an oral statement or an opportunity to raise matters on behalf of his constituents, and I applaud him for that. And I want to ensure, as I try to do, that he and every other member of this House has ample opportunity to do that on whatever issue of the day is before this House, and that statements are brought, that we have time for government business, that we have time for all the other important business of the day, and I will continue to look forward to working with him to ensure we do that.
Point of order, Shadow Defence Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I seek your advice on the following as I seek to set the record straight. To be clear, at the weekend, I became aware of an email sent to a group of journalists from the Ministry of Defence which stated, "We will have a reading room open for you from 10:30 a.m. in Horse Guards on Monday. You will have the opportunity to read through the full embargoed SDR publication." After seeing that, I emailed the Secretary of State's office on Sunday afternoon and asked, given the journalists would see it at 10:30, could we be sent a copy at 9 a.m? They refused. They told us we would get a copy of the statement, i.e. the oral statement to the House, in the usual way. I then repeatedly asked the Minister of State for the Armed Forces, who's sitting there, if we could get a copy of the SDR. He refused. So, Mr. Speaker, I've now been told something else. that members of industry, representatives of industry, were allowed to see the SDR at 10:30. What? This is a multi-billion-pound industry. That's highly market sensitive, Mr. Speaker. So can I ask your advice on this point? Can I ask your advice on this point? As I understand, the Vote Office has multiple physical hard copies of the Strategic Defence Review that I have not read at all, my colleagues have not read, any parliamentary colleagues, because it was only given to me as I came into the chamber, so obviously I've not been able to read it. Journalists have had 5 hours. It is unacceptable. Can I ask if the Vote Office could be asked to exceptionally release it now?
Sit down. I'm going to cover, there's a couple more. I'm very disappointed that if industry have seen this Strategic Defence Review, members of this House, members of the Select Committee of Defence haven't seen it, there is something fundamentally gone wrong here. I really do believe we need the answers, and it might be worth, and it's up to the leader, I'm not under pressure, that she goes away, gets some answer, comes back to the House. The fact that journalists have been allowed to see it, but defence people who's got skin in the game before MPs here, I am very, very concerned. Dr. Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to that point of order, you may have noticed that I briefly exited the chamber to see if copies of the SDR were available at the Vote Office, and I was told quite rightly that no, they would be made available when the Secretary of State has made his statement and when he sits down immediately after that. So doesn't this all lead back to the situation that if we were to have the press conferences the day after, not the day before or on the same day as these statements, then everybody would have time to read the report and we would have an initial stab at it with very little sight of it on the day, and then we could go into it in more detail subsequently as we usually do.
Okay, I'm sure that's a good point of clarification on the way forward. Ian Duncan-Smith.
One order, Mr. Speaker. I've just seen the headline on the Telegraph, which dropped at just after 10 o'clock this morning, and the headline says, "I've read the Defence Review." This from a journalist who must have been fully briefed and handed a copy of that long before anybody else got a copy. Mr. Speaker, surely that is an abuse.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a point of order, and I wondered if the Minister wanted to correct the record, because yes, I was absolutely offered a private briefing this morning, but I was absolutely clarified that I would not receive the SDR until the Minister stood up. I have received it 40 minutes ago.
I've got Simon Hall, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe there is precedent for this to take place, but given the seriousness of the issues, the defence of the realm, it's the first duty of government, as we know. Is there any merit in you, sir, considering suspending the House to allow for those people who are going to be called to speak on behalf of their respective parties to at least have the courtesy which has clearly been extended to industry leaders and journalists?
Ellen Morgan. Oh, sorry, done that. Sorry, Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there any way we can have a list of the commercial companies who've had sight of this ahead of anybody else, because commercially sensitive decisions might be made that impact the defence industry and give people a market advantage?
The point that I was hinting at before. I am very, very concerned that people who've got skin in the game, who may be able to take advantage of what's in that report, I hope that there has been no trading done on the back of it, because that would be a real concern. I find it quite appalling that members still haven't, and I'm sure the leader could now, if she wishes, suggest that we allow the report so members have a chance to read it, because I think it is totally out of order that we know they're sat there, that they can be made available, and nobody is being given that chance. Rather than suspend the House, time is tight. If people could go and collect it now, so they could be reading before the next UQ. I ask the leader to see if she wants to agree with that.
I mean, my understanding is, but I will check with the Defence Secretary, is that these things are normally published a bit like a budget when they're sat down. However, but I do understand that the front benches opposite have a copy of it now. But the Defence Secretary is here. I don't know if he's happy for it to be published.
Can I also say I was offered a briefing this morning. I'd already read it all in the Times. The only comparative is I have not been offered the Strategic Defence Review copy myself. I do believe that when business has seen it, the media has seen it, who else may come out of the woodwork that's seen it, I think it is only right that the members of this House should now have an opportunity in order that their questions can be informed on what's in the review. Now, what I would say is, Secretary of State, are you happy to...
Mr. Speaker, we have followed... You want an answer from me, Mr. Speaker, and I will give you this, and I will certainly give you this. We have followed the procedure of the last Defence Review when the Shadow Defence Secretary was a Defence Minister. I was the Shadow Defence Secretary at that time. We had no advanced copy of the Defence Review. We were not offered a briefing, which I've offered him and the other front benches. I am really concerned to ensure that this House has proper access to this. We've been following convention. You're quite right, Mr. Speaker, the copies of this Defence Review are in the vote office, as is established procedure. They would be normally available when I sit down following the statement. In these circumstances, Mr. Speaker, and following your encouragement, I would like through you to suggest that members of this House, in advance of the statement I'm proposing to make, do now have access so they can see it before I rise.
I thank the Secretary of State for that, and I'm sure members will receive the copies as we speak now. Right, that completes that urgent question. I'll let the front benches change over. We now come to the next urgent question. Chair of the Select Committee, Tam Singh Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the Secretary of State for Defence if he will make a statement on the future of the UK's nuclear deterrent.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friend and the Chair of the Defence Select Committee for this chance to set out the Government's total commitment to the UK's nuclear deterrent, which has been the bedrock of our national security for nearly 70 years. My right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, will shortly be outlining the details of the Strategic Defence Review to the House, and this review will be underpinned by our nuclear deterrent, part of our blueprint for a new hybrid navy with next-generation dreadnought nuclear-armed submarines and up to 12 SSN Orcas conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines, serving alongside best-in-class warships, support ships and new cutting-edge autonomous vessels. Building on the £15 billion investment set out for the UK's sovereign nuclear warhead programme in this Parliament. This is not only a manifesto promise delivered, and most importantly, it is our most important military capability secured for generations to come. This investment will also deliver a defence dividend of highly skilled, well-paid jobs across the country, with our nuclear warhead programme alone creating and sustaining over 9,000 jobs, along with thousands more in supply chains. To ensure the demands of our nuclear programme can be met, we are working closely with industry partners, aiming to double defence and civil nuclear apprentice and graduate intakes. This will mean 30,000 apprentices over the next 10 years. Part of this historic renewal of our nuclear deterrent and our communities across the country. Mr. Speaker, the first duty of every government is to keep its people safe. And in a more dangerous world, peace and security are best achieved through deterrence and preparedness. As the son of a Royal Navy submariner myself, can I thank our outstanding submariners who patrol 24/7 to keep us and our allies safe. But we know that threats are increasing and we must act decisively to face down Russian aggression in particular. Our nuclear deterrent is the ultimate guarantor of our security. The Defence Secretary will momentarily make a statement to give further details, but these are only possible because of the Government's historic decision to increase defence spending to 2.5% of our GDP by 2027, the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. This government has the will, the plan and the means to secure the nuclear deterrent for generations to come. We are making Britain secure at home and strong abroad. Thank you.
To the Select Committee, time now to Singh Dessie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response and indeed your good self for kindly granting this urgent question. Following the Sunday Times report that the Ministry of Defence is looking to purchase American fighter jets capable of deploying tactical nuclear weapons, it is essential that the House receives clarity on the government's nuclear deterrent policy, an issue of critical national importance. But how has the media got hold of such sensitive information on future nuclear deterrent plans, and what steps is the government taking to investigate this leak? If the government is indeed pursuing an air-launched tactical nuclear capability, this is a huge deal and would represent a significant shift in the UK's nuclear posture. Indeed, it will be the UK's most significant defence expansion since the Cold War. It raises serious concerns, Mr. Speaker, about our sovereignty over nuclear weapons, strategic coherence with our current doctrine, and the principle of continuous at-sea deterrence. Despite the defence nuclear enterprise accounting for around 20% of the defence budget, it remains largely outside meaningful Parliament scrutiny, including by our Defence Committee. This must change. So I ask my right honourable friend, the Minister, how will Parliament be enabled to scrutinise changes to the UK's nuclear programmes? Have discussions taken place with the US, and what role would they play in this capability? Thirdly, can the Minister confirm that the UK will retain full operational control over any nuclear weapons? And also, Mr. Speaker, given that tactical nuclear weapons lower the threshold for use, what assessment has been made of the risks of escalation? Can the Minister confirm that only the Prime Minister would have authority to use them, and only in extreme self-defence? And finally, has there been consultation with NATO allies on this potential shift? Mr. Speaker, decisions of this magnitude must be transparent. The future of our nuclear deterrent must be based on clarity, credibility, and above all, British control. Thank you very much.
Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm acutely aware that I don't want to eat the Secretary of State sandwiches and his statement that he is shortly about to make.
The Sunday Times did it for us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will shortly lay out more details of the Strategic Defence Review, but I can happy answering a few of the gentleman's questions. Parliament has the opportunity to scrutinise the outcomes of Lord Robertson's Strategic Defence Review via the House of Commons Defence Select Committee. I'm certain, in fact I know that he has the reviewers in front of his committee shortly and will be able to ask them difficult questions. I'm aware that there are proposals about how we scrutinise some more of our sensitive and classified areas. Those conversations are continuing between the House and the government. We, of course, continue to have conversations with the United States, our most important security partner, and our NATO allies, but he will understand that I won't be able to detail the precise nature of those conversations to the House at this stage. But can I reassure him that when it comes to the continued at-sea nuclear deterrent, the backbone of our national security, we retain full operational control of our independent nuclear deterrent. Certainly, it is the first duty, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, of any government to keep our country safe, and the nuclear deterrent is our ultimate guarantor of our national security and our safety, and I can confirm that only the Prime Minister has the power to launch nuclear actions in this respect.
Shadow Secretary of State James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Chairman of the Select Committee for tabling this important question. Following comments in the press last month from Sir Simon Case, former head of the Civil Service, that the UK should consider air-launched nuclear capabilities, I wrote in the Express on the 25th of May that our nuclear deterrent needed to be even more resilient, both in terms of CASD, but also, and I quote, potentially by diversifying our methods of delivering nuclear strike. The reason I believe it would be the right decision to diversify our methods of delivering nuclear weapons is that we have to recognise the threat posed by Russia in particular, and the fact that they have the ability to operate nuclear weapons at the tactical and theatre level. To deter effectively, we must be able to do the same. So we support in principle moves to widen our nuclear capabilities on the assumption that we do so working closely with our NATO allies. But I gently suggest to the government they may need our support to carry it through. Just to remind them, 8 of his front bench colleagues voted against the renewal of our nuclear deterrent in 2016, including the Deputy Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Secretaries of State for Scotland and Wales, and the Minister for the Indo-Pacific, and others. And in case the Minister was hoping he could rely on the Liberal Democrats, not only did all but one of their MPs also vote against Trident renewal in 2016, but as a condition of supporting the coalition, they shamefully demanded we delay the renewal of our nuclear submarines, leaving us to rely on older boats for far longer, leading to longer maintenance periods and, above all, directly contributing to the punishingly long tours of duty for our CASD naval crews. Now, Madam Speaker, having had the privilege to serve as the Minister responsible for nuclear and to chair the Defence Nuclear Board, I understand why the Minister needs to choose his words carefully. But can he at least recognise that 204 days for a patrol is far too long, and that in addition to any plan to diversify the deterrent launch method, we need to ensure our strategic CASD enterprise has an effective and productive industrial base, delivering faster maintenance times? Finally, can he confirm what the estimated cost will be of delivering an air launch option and by when he would expect it to be in service?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I say again, put on record my thanks to all those members of our Royal Navy who go out on patrol, not just on our Vanguard-class submarines, but also on our Astute-class boats and the previous T-class boats that defend our deterrent while at sea. They guarantee our security by ensuring there is a continual at-sea nuclear deterrent every single day and have done for over 70 years. Every single member on this side of the House were elected on a manifesto commitment with a triple lock for our nuclear submarines. First, that we will continue to support the continued at-sea nuclear deterrent that this government does. Secondly, that we will build 4 Dreadnought-class nuclear submarines at Barrow, which we are committed to deliver. And thirdly, that we will maintain and provide all the upgrades required for the continued at-sea nuclear deterrent. Indeed, that includes the renewal of our sovereign warhead, which the Defence Secretary will get to when he makes his statement on the Strategic Defence Review later today. I'm absolutely determined that we will guarantee our national security and working across government in order to deliver that.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate my honourable friend, the Chair of the Defence Select Committee, for securing this important urgent question. He and the Minister referred to the need to have full scrutiny by this House of such sensitive matters, something that has been being pursued now for over a year under both the last government and this. Could the Minister give me any reassurance that this is now finally progressing after some delay at the change of government?
Madam Deputy Speaker, yes, I can. The Defence Secretary has, I believe, has opened to those conversations. There may still be a difference of opinion about the best way of scrutinising some of our most sensitive matters, but he is open to that conversation. I would encourage the Honourable Lady to continue her conversations with the Defence Secretary.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're facing a once-in-a-generation set of threats, including an imperialist Putin and a completely unreliable President Trump, who we cannot depend on to support our defence. Our nuclear deterrent remains the best and ultimate guarantor of the UK's security. We need to ensure that it meets the scale of these challenges, so it's right that the government is looking at ways to guarantee its effectiveness. Clearly, delivering the Dreadnought class on time is a crucial part of this, and I welcome the update the Secretary of State provided regarding these timescales before recess. Looking ahead, it's important that this House understands what the purpose of any future addition to our nuclear deterrent would be. Can the Minister outline what discussions his department has had on how further additions to the deterrent would positively bolster the UK's security?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, can I say to the Honourable Lady that the United States remains the UK's most important security partner. No two nations on earth are as integrated in our defence, intelligence and communication systems as the United States and the United Kingdom. That is a position that this government intends to continue with, because it is in our national interest to make sure that we remain strongly connected with our partners in the United States. I'm very open to conversations around how we bolster our deterrence. Indeed, I believe the Defence Secretary, when it comes to his statement on the Strategic Defence Review, may have more to add on this matter.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I absolutely recognise and support the increase in defence spending and the reasons behind that. But can my honourable friend indicate what impact this may have on the Non-Proliferation Treaty? Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government's proud to be increasing defence spending, an additional £5 billion in our budget this year, an extra £13 billion by 2027 compared to what the situation we inherited in cash terms from the last general election. It is right that we invest in not only our nuclear deterrent capability, but others. As a nation that abides by the rule of law, we will continue to do so in all matters, including those relating to nuclear proliferation.
Alex Shalbrook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Clearly there's been identified in the review that there is a gap in our nuclear capability of having tactical nuclear weapons in place. Therefore, that gap will have been noticed elsewhere amongst our adversaries. So, can the Minister assure the House that that gap that has now been identified in terms of British military power is being filled by other NATO allies until we are able to fill it ourselves?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. It is absolutely vital that as a NATO-first defence policy that this government has, that we support and are enabled by our allies, especially those in NATO. We will continue to do so. The Strategic Defence Review may set out words in that regard, and I don't want to get ahead of the Defence Secretary's statement, so I won't give those before he does here.
Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is a consensus in this place about the importance of an independent nuclear deterrent for keeping us safe, but there is far less understanding of the need and use of tactical nuclear weapons. Does my honourable friend agree with me that we need to foster a much better understanding of how the logic of deterrence works and how it can be and is being undermined by countries like Russia, because only then can we explain why our nuclear deterrence needs to change in order to remain effective for protecting us?
Minister.
A fundamental part of the Strategic Defence Review conversations that Lord Robertson and the review team have been having since the Labour government came to power is how we reinforce the concept of deterrence and why the concept of deterrence is so important to our security. Our armed forces, some of the best in the world, have capabilities that should deter any aggression. We will be further enhancing that with the announcements made that the Defence Secretary will be making shortly in the Strategic Defence Review, because we want to deter aggression, but if necessary, we need to have the capabilities in order to defeat it, and that is what the Defence Review that will be announced shortly will detail to the House.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As this is the issue that brought me into politics many decades ago, it's an absolute pleasure to hear the full-throated commitment of both the government and the Liberal Democrats to the strategic nuclear deterrent. If the future of the American commitment to NATO were not in doubt, we would not need to think about tactical nuclear weapons ourselves, because this role has always been fulfilled by US tactical nuclear weapons allocated to the defence of NATO. Can the Minister assure the House that we have sufficient confidence in the willingness of the United States, despite the present administration's attitude to NATO, that the cooperation that we need for the future of our strategic nuclear deterrent is not in doubt?
Minister.
I can indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. The defence partnership that we have with the United States on defence, in particular nuclear deterrence, is a strong one. We know that President Trump and indeed the US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth has reaffirmed their support to Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. And as we build towards the NATO summit in The Hague, not only will the UK be setting out how we further plan to enhance our deterrence, but we'll be setting out how we plan to make sure that collectively across the NATO alliance we are more lethal, more able to deter. And the reason that additional deterrence is necessary is because of the increased threats that we are facing as a nation, both conventional, cyber, but also increased nuclear threats.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK is one of 5 nuclear countries which is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So will my honourable friend tell the House what steps his government are doing to reduce the number of nuclear deterrents that our country carry, as is one of our obligations under the treaty?
Sir.
My friend for her question. As part of our commitment to non-proliferation, we continue to abide by all measures of the treaties that we have signed. Our renewal of our nuclear deterrent is necessary in a more dangerous world, and as the ultimate guarantor of our security, it will be central to this government's defence plans in the future.
Sir Desmond Swain.
In pursuit of deterrence, will he recommit to first use when either the strategic or tactical situation demands it?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if I was reading out our nuclear playbook at the dispatch box here, I believe he would be one of the first people to be raising concerns about that. So I will decline that very polite invitation to detail our nuclear strategy. That ambiguity is absolutely certain, but we do not have first strike policy, as he will know, in this House. We maintain our nuclear deterrence capacity in support of not just the United Kingdom, but also we are the only European NATO member to dedicate our nuclear deterrent in defence of all NATO member states, a really important part of our collective deterrence together.
Richard Burden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Far from the claims from successive British governments that Britain has an independent nuclear deterrent, isn't the reality that it's entirely dependent on the United States, both technically and politically? And instead of spending billions more on nuclear weapons, while public services face real budget constraints, shouldn't we be instead honouring our commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty by working towards the global elimination of nuclear weapons?
Sir.
Every single member of the government benches stood on a manifesto in support of the renewal of our nuclear deterrent, in support of continuing at-sea nuclear deterrent, in building 4 Dreadnought-class submarines and providing the upgrades necessary to ensure the effectiveness of that system. That's a manifesto commitment that we can all be proud of, and it is one that this government will stick to.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Since the Minister mentioned it, and my predecessor on the Public Accounts mentioned it, it is now over a year since the Public Accounts Committee produced a report as to how sensitive scrutiny could be carried out in this House. It's really important. It feels as though we are being given the runaround. Will the Minister give a commitment today to set a date when the Government will give a decision on this matter?
Minister.
Well, as I reply to the honourable lady on this side of the House, I know conversations are continuing to have between members of this House and the Defence Secretary. He's open to further conversations in order to try and find a way forward here, and I'm certain that he would welcome a conversation with the right honourable gentleman.
Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister was right to highlight the nuclear deterrent as the cornerstone of our defence capability. It's also a national effort. Will he join me in commending the work of the unsung scientists and engineers at the Atomic Weapons Establishment, whose world-leading and highly secret and confidential work ensures the ongoing independence of the UK's nuclear deterrent?
Minister.
I'm very happy to do so. It is not just the scientists, the engineers at AWE that support our nuclear deterrent. It is the engineers and apprentices in Devonport, in my own constituency, that refit our nuclear submarines. It is the entire supply chain, from Rolls-Royce to BAE Systems to Babcock and countless other companies and organisations that are involved in this national endeavour that helps keep our country safe. And I commend the work of all of them in terms of their contribution to our national security.
Pete Wishart.
Speaker, sometimes when we discuss the nuclear deterrent, we forget that this is the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, which, if ever deployed, would quite literally end civilization as we know it. He might not agree, but does he accept that opposition to nuclear weapons is a legitimate conscience, moral position, and it's a position that is held by most people in most nations in the world? So will he and his government colleagues stop trying to demean and insult those who simply legitimately want nothing to do with these evil weapons and want them gone from their country and their community?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question. I recognise there is a range of views on nuclear weapons. I also recognise that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs in Scotland that are dependent and supporting our nuclear fleet, that do superb work on the basis of the Clyde, and support not just the submarines but our entire nuclear supply chain through SMEs and larger companies in factories, engineering workshops and other businesses right across Scotland. And I'm certain that although we may disagree when it comes to our nuclear views on that, he was not speaking for them when he made that point.
Jonathan Davies.
Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier this year, along with a cross-party delegation of MPs on the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, I visited Fastlane, which was a very important visit for me because the nuclear reactors on the V-boats are made in my constituency. But what was particularly concerning was to hear about the deployments which are now lasting over 200 days, and that is totally unacceptable. Can the Minister tell us what steps he's taken to reduce the length of those deployments now while maintaining our continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent?
Minister.
As a government, we are seeking to renew the contract between the nation and those who serve. And in particular, if you look at those submariners who are involved with our nuclear patrols, reducing the length of those patrols is a key part of what we have to do. One of the aspects that I can say to the honourable gentleman in this House is the investment that is going into our nuclear submarine refits, because ensuring that we can refit the submarines in time, on schedule, on budget, is absolutely essential in making sure that we can rotate between these 4 boats, because previous governments delayed renewing our nuclear boats. We are taking the decision to support the Dreadnought renewal, which will absolutely provide the cutting-edge capabilities necessary for our nuclear deterrent to continue in the future. And I commend all those involved in our nuclear enterprise, from engineers to the submariners that serve on our submarines, for keeping our country safe.
Sir Bernard Jenkin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would the Minister agree that any party that aspires to government in this country should really be committed to our independent nuclear deterrent wholeheartedly and unambiguously, which I'm afraid wasn't always the case when we had a coalition under the Conservatives because of our coalition partners, but I'm very pleased that they have repented now. But isn't it absolutely extraordinary that a party that now presents itself as some kind of alternative government can't even send a single member of Parliament to sit in this House while we are debating this existential issue for the security of our country?
Can I say to him, I agree with him, that any party aspiring to government must understand not just how dangerous our world is, how the threats are increasing, how our nuclear deterrent is the backbone of our national security, but also to be part of those conversations. And I note that the party he refers to are absent from this debate here today.
Chris Vince.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we all want to live in a world where the need for nuclear deterrent doesn't exist, but sadly I think we'd all recognise we don't live in that world, and certainly less so than we did a decade ago. Does the Minister agree with me that whether we're discussing the UK's nuclear capacity or any other capacity, we must have a NATO-first defence policy and lead within the alliance? And while I'm here, can I congratulate the Veterans Minister for his epic feat up Everest last week?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this gives me a moment to thank and to celebrate the work of the Veterans Minister for completing Operation Mountain Goat, the speed climb of Everest. I have to say I commend him and all those who did so on their aspiration to raise £1 million for veterans charities. It's something I think on a cross-party basis we can get behind, but it's absolutely essential that we continue to support our national security, and the more that we can do that on a cross-party basis, the more that the power of our deterrence is something that we can shout loudly and proudly about, especially when it relates to directing increased defence spending at UK companies, creating jobs nationwide and using defence as an engine for growth that it truly is.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm in favour of this new method of delivery. It gives us more options and probably in the long run makes it less likely that nuclear weapons are going to be used. However, cost is key. And with 20% of the defence budget already taken up by the defence and nuclear enterprise, it's clear that our conventional capabilities are suffering. So will the Minister be able to tell us whether the increased cost from these new warheads is going to come out of the MOD's budget or out of a special Treasury Reserve, as has sometimes been the case previously?
Minister.
The increase in defence spending that we have secured, that the Prime Minister announced in February this year, provides us with the opportunity not just to renew our conventional capabilities, but also to look at how we can further support our nuclear deterrence and also build our cyber capabilities as well. Taken together, that's how we build that collective responsibility. I wouldn't want to give him an incorrect answer, so I'm happy writing to him about that point that he raised.
Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I congratulate the Minister on his robust stance on UK nuclear deterrent. I welcome that, and I'm interested to know how the Minister, from a whip's perspective, plans to bring his parliamentary party on side when so many have voted against nuclear deterrence and tried it. Thank you.
Well, it was a question of two halves, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me say I agree with her on the first half, and I thank her for the cross-party nature that we can achieve here. It is a source of great pride to all the ministers in the Ministry of Defence that our strong support for our nuclear deterrent and our national security was in the Labour manifesto, that manifesto enjoyed incredible support at the last general election, and not only are we able to bring forward a strategic defence review that will update our capabilities, we're also able to bring forward our spending commitment to spend 2.5% on GDP to April 2027, 3 years before anyone thought that possible. It is thanks to that brave decision by the Prime Minister that we're able to renew our capabilities and increase our deterrent capability as a country.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was a Labour government led by Harold Wilson in the 1960s that initiated the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It was during a period of the Cold War that the number of nuclear warheads was reduced by the 5 declared nuclear weapon states. This announcement by the Secretary of State and the talk today of increasing nuclear warheads is in breach of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's at variance with the global ban concept of getting rid of nuclear weapons. And could he tell us, how is the world made more safer by the ability to destroy it more times over than exists at the present time? Where is the strategy for nuclear disarmament? Where is the strategy for peace?
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his question, and I recognise it comes from a really heartfelt and personal belief in nuclear disarmament. On this side of the House, we do support international disarmament obligations to the ultimate goal of a world without nuclear weapons and to its obligation to pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to nuclear disarmament. But I would gently say to the Right Honourable Gentleman and to all members of this House that we are facing increased nuclear threats as a nation, not just from those established nuclear powers, but from the risk of proliferation of nuclear technologies, especially as technology becomes more mobile and more portable and more miniaturised. It is precisely for that reason that that was featured as part of the Strategic Defence Review that the Defence Secretary will detail further shortly.
Ben Obsujecti.
Speaker, we're not due to hit 2.5% for 2 years, and 3% is by no means guaranteed. With the continuous at-sea deterrent ring fence, spending on conventional forces is well under 2% and in the bottom third of NATO countries. Introducing an air-launched nuclear weapon into our arsenal is a significant change to our doctrine and fundamentally might change the way all our forces operate. We spend less on defence than other NATO nations with a nuclear deterrent, so when will we achieve parity regarding spending on conventional forces specifically?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his questions, and I'm actually reasonably normally impressed with him on defence matters. But let me say politely to him on this. We have £5 billion extra in the defence budget in this financial year, thanks to the decisions taken by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. By 2027, we'll have over £13 billion in cash terms compared to the situation that his party left in this. And when it comes to increasing defence spending, we're doing it 3 years earlier. And it's worth reminding himself that the last time this country spent 2.5% on defence was under a last Labour government, something his party never achieved for a single day when they were in power.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Most mobility operations require an element of surprise, and the government certainly achieved that by delivering news of the return of tactical nuclear weapons through the medium of the Sunday Times. That marmalade dropper moment set aside, what impact will the apparent purchase of F-35 Lightning fighters from America have on the GCAP project, a project we are putting together with Italy and Japan? Or should I wait for the you read it here last Strategic Defence Review?
Minister.
Well, in the spirit of the day, I suggest he waits for the Defence Secretary's statement, which is very coming soon. I'm very aware, when you go to a gig, you want the main act, not the warm-up act, so I look forward to him speaking in due course.
Right, so that completes the urgent question. We'll let the benches more or less in the position it should be. Right, we now come to the statement. Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement on the Strategic Defence Review, and I have laid the full 130-page review report first before this House. I'm grateful to be able to do so. I'm grateful to be able to make this statement, Mr. Speaker, on the first day back from recess. Mr. Speaker, the world has changed. We must respond. The SDR is our plan for change for defence. A plan to meet the threats we face, a plan to step up on European security and lead in NATO, a plan that learns the lessons from Ukraine, a plan to seize the defence dividend from our record increase in defence investment to boost jobs and growth throughout the United Kingdom, and a plan to put the men and women of our armed forces at the heart of our defence plans. Better pay, better kit, better housing. Through the SDR, we will make our armed forces stronger and the British people safer. And I'd like, Mr. Speaker, through you, to thank those who led the SDR. Lord Robertson of Port Ellen, General Barons, and Dr. Fiona Hill, the politician, the soldier, and the foreign policy expert, as they say themselves in their foreword. They have put in a huge effort alongside others. This is a first of its kind, externally led review, a process in which we received 8,000 submissions from experts, individuals, organisations and MPs from across the House, including the Shadow Defence Secretary. I thank them all, and I thank those in the MOD who have contributed to this SDR. This is not just the government's review, it is Britain's defence review. And so the government endorses the SDR's vision, accepts its 62 recommendations, which will be implemented. Mr. Speaker, the threats we face are now more serious and less predictable than at any time since the end of the Cold War. We face war in Europe, growing Russian aggression, new nuclear risks and daily cyber attacks at home. Our adversaries are working more in alliance with one another, while technology is changing the way war is fought. We are in a new era of threat, which demands a new era for UK defence. And Mr. Speaker, since the general election, we have demonstrated that we are a government dedicated to delivering for defence, committing the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. £5 billion extra this year, 2.5% of GDP in 2027, the ambition to hit 3% in the next Parliament. But, Mr. Speaker, there can be no investment without reform. And so we are already driving also the deepest reforms to defence in 50 years. And these will ensure clearer responsibilities, better delivery, stronger budget control, and new efficiencies worth £6 billion in this Parliament. Money, all of which will be reinvested directly into defence. Mr. Speaker, our armed forces will always do what's needed to keep the nation safe, 24/7 in more than 50 countries around the world. But in a more dangerous world, the SDR confirms that we must move to warfighting readiness. Warfighting readiness means stronger deterrence. We need stronger deterrence to avoid the huge costs, human and economic, that wars create. And we prevent wars by being strong enough to fight and win them. And that is what has made NATO the most successful defence alliance in history over the last 75 years. So, Mr. Speaker, we will establish a new hybrid navy by building Dreadnought, AUKUS submarines, cutting-edge warships and new autonomous vessels. Our carriers will carry the first hybrid air wings in Europe. We will develop the next generation RAF with F-35s, upgraded Typhoons, 6th-gen GCAP and autonomous fighters to defend Britain's skies and to be able to strike anywhere in the world. And we will make the British Army 10 times more lethal by combining future technology of drones, autonomy and AI with the heavy metal of tanks and artillery. Mr. Speaker, for too long, our army has been asked to do more with less. We inherited a long-run recruitment crisis, 14 Tory years of cuts to full-time troops. Reversing this decline will take time, but we are acting to stem the loss now and aiming to increase the British Army to at least 76,000 full-time soldiers in the next Parliament. Mr. Speaker, for the first time in a generation, we are a government who want the number of regular soldiers to rise. And on Homeland, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that will protect our island home. We'll do so by committing £1 billion in new funding to Homeland air and missile defences, by creating a new cyber command to defend Britain in the grey zone, and by preparing legislation to improve defence readiness. Mr. Speaker, as Ukraine shows, a country's armed forces are only as strong as the industry that stands behind them. So this SDR begins a new partnership with industry, with innovators and with investors. We will make defence an engine for growth. An engine for growth to create jobs and increase prosperity in every nation and every region of the UK. Take our nuclear enterprise. We will commit £15 billion in investment into the Sovereign Warhead programme in this Parliament, supporting over 9,000 jobs. We will establish continuous submarine production through investments in Barrow and in Derby that will allow us to produce a submarine every 18 months, allowing us to grow our nuclear attack submarine fleet to up to 12 submarines, supporting more than 20,000 jobs. And on munitions, we will invest £6 billion in this Parliament, including for 6 new munitions factories and up to 7,000 new long-range weapons, supporting nearly 2,000 jobs. Mr. Speaker, the lives of workers in Barrow or Derby or Govan, where I was with the Prime Minister this morning, are being transformed not just by this defence investment, but by the pride and purpose that comes with work, that comes with defence work. And in the coming years, more communities and more working people will benefit from the defence dividend that this brings. Now, Mr. Speaker, Ukraine also tells us that whoever gets new technology into the hands of their armed forces fastest will have the advantage. So we will place Britain at the leading edge of innovation in NATO. We will double investment into autonomous systems this Parliament. We will invest more than £1 billion to integrate our armed forces through a new digital targeting web, and we will finance a £400 million UK Defence Innovation Organisation. And Mr. Speaker, to ensure that Britain gains the maximum benefit from what we invent and what we produce in this country, we will create a new Defence Exports Office in the MOD, driving exports to our allies and driving growth at home. Mr. Speaker, the SDR sets a new vision, a new framework for defence investment. The work to confirm a new defence investment plan, superseding the last government's defence equipment plan, will be completed in the autumn. It will ensure our frontline forces get what they need when they need it. The plan will be deliverable, it will be affordable, it will consider infrastructure alongside capabilities, it will seize the opportunities of advanced tech, and it will seize the opportunities to grow the British economy. And Mr. Speaker, as we lose the national service generation, fewer families across this country have a direct connection to the armed forces. And so we must do more to reconnect the nation with those who defend us. And so, as the SDR recommends, we will increase the number of cadets by 30%. We will introduce a voluntary gap year scheme for school and college leavers, and we will develop a new strategic reserve by 2030. And Mr. Speaker, we must also renew the nation's contract with those who serve. We've already awarded the biggest pay increase in over 20 years, an inflation-busting increase this year, and now I've announced we will invest £7 billion of funding this Parliament for military accommodation, including £1.5 billion of new money for rapid work to deal with the scandal of military family homes. Mr. Speaker, This SDR is the first defence review in a generation for growth and for transformation in UK defence. It will end 14 years of hollowing out in our armed forces, and instead we will see investment increased, the Navy expanded, the Army grown, the Air Force upgraded, warfighting readiness restored, NATO strengthened, the nuclear deterrent guaranteed, advanced technology developed, and jobs created in every nation and region of this country. Mr. Speaker, the Strategic Defence Review will make Britain safer, more secure at home and stronger abroad.
Shadow Secretary of State James Cartledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I turn to the substance, in responding to my point of order, the Secretary of State said that when he was in opposition, and I quote, "We were not offered a briefing. We had no advance copy of the Defence Review."
Order. Please. It's not been a good day so far, and I don't want to interrupt it anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, and he said this occurred when I was a minister at the MOD. In March 2023, before I became a minister, he was invited to a reading room in the morning of publication. And on the Defence Command Paper Refresh, July 2023, when I was a minister, when he said he didn't get a copy, I can confirm, and happy to substantiate this, a hard copy was dropped off at his office 9:30 a.m. that morning. I asked for a copy repeatedly on Sunday and on Monday, and earlier this morning we weren't given one. I've not even read the document, and I'm the Shadow Secretary of State. What I can add, Mr. Speaker, some of the biggest defence companies in this land were given copies at 8 a.m. this morning.
Shameful.
They've had hours to read it. I haven't read it at all. This is meant to be a democracy. This is meant to be a parliament. How can we hold them to account?
Bye-bye, Luke.
Now, Mr. Speaker, whilst they may have tried to hide the actual document from us for as long as possible today, what they cannot hide is what's happened in plain sight. A total unravelling of their strategic defence review because, quite simply, they haven't got a plan to fund it. An SDR without the funding is an empty wish list. The ships and submarines it talks of, they're a fantasy fleet. The reviewers were clear in the Telegraph today that the commitment to 3%, and I quote, established the affordability of the plan. Now, on Thursday, the Defence Secretary said in an interview with The Times that reaching 3% was a certainty. But by the weekend, he had completely backtracked to 3% being just an ambition. And today, the Prime Minister was unable to give a date by when 3% will be reached. Why? Because the Treasury haven't approved a plan to pay for it. Now, the Secretary of State and I have both been Treasury Ministers and Defence Ministers. He knows, as well as I do, how this works. For the Treasury to approve a plan, it will have to feature billions of pounds of cuts to existing MOD programmes. And so this SDR has dodged the big decisions on existing capabilities. Can the Secretary of State confirm that the so-called Defence Investment Plan, to be published in the autumn, will set out the cuts needed for the Treasury to agree a plan to get to 3%, details we should have had today in the SDR? Can he also confirm that the total budget for new measures announced in this SDR over the next 5 years is less than £10 billion, less than we'll be spending to lease back our own base on Diego Garcia? Isn't this the hard truth? The government are unable to guarantee the money our armed forces need, but the one plan they can guarantee is the one to give billions to Mauritius for land we currently own freehold. And can he finally tell us what percentage of the payment to Chagos will be met by the MOD? He's never told us before. So let me suggest an alternative path to him, Mr. Speaker. First, guaranteeing to hit 3% and doing so this Parliament, not the next. Secondly, getting a grip on our welfare budget rather than competing with reform to expand it. Thirdly, saving billions by scrapping their crazy Chagos plan. That is a plan to back our armed forces and make our country stronger from the party that actually last spent 3% in 1996. The terrible shame of this SDR unravelling is that this was an extraordinary... Well, in between, it was a Labour government that came in 1997. I don't know what they're laughing about. The terrible shame of this SDR unravelling, Mr Speaker, is that this was an extraordinary opportunity to overhaul our armed forces in a world of growing threats. Only yesterday, we saw the Ukrainians once again demonstrating with their audacious attack on Russian nuclear bombers how profoundly war has changed. Yep. And yet, it is true, some of the best long-range, one-way attack drones used in Ukraine have not been built by Ukraine, but by UK defence SMEs. We are actually incredibly well placed to be a leading nation in the development of uncrewed forces. But, Mr Speaker, how many military drones have the government actually purchased for our own military since the general election? Written answer to me, Mr Speaker, the answer, not 3,000, not 300, 3. They've purchased 3 reconnaissance drones since the election and not a single one-way attack drone. That's the reality. Because for the past year, the Treasury have used the SDR to effectively put MOD procurement on hold. Absolutely shameful when we need to rearm and pace at scale. But at least the Secretary of State for Defence knows how the rest of the country feels totally let down by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But if there's one capability that matters more than any other, Mr Speaker, it's people. We agree on the critical importance of recruitment and retention, which is why I did so much of the work to buy back the defence estate so that we can actually rebuild it and rebuild substandard defence accommodation. But the army is down by 1,000 since the election. So if this government really wants to address recruitment and retention, would it not be total madness to scrap the legislation protecting our Northern Ireland veterans from a new era of ambulance-chasing lawfare? Surely, Mr Speaker, nothing could be more damaging for morale and recruitment and retention than to once again pursue our veterans for the crime of serving this country and keeping us safe from terrorism. To conclude, Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State says he wants to send a strong message to Moscow, but the messages he's sending are profoundly weak. Surrendering our fishing grounds for an EU defence pact that doesn't offer a penny in return. Surrendering the Chagos Islands to the delight of China and Iran, and surrendering our army veterans to the lawyers. To cap it all, and after so much hype, producing a damp squib SDR that is overdue, underfunded and totally underwhelming. Our armed forces deserve a lot better than this.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, I see the way the world is changing. I see the way the Chancellor is fixing the economic foundations after the 14 years of failure under the Conservative government, and I have to say to the House, I have no doubt that we will meet our ambition to hit 3% of spending on defence in the next Parliament. It is something that the Prime Minister this morning reinforced. He said that the SDR can be delivered because our commitment to 2.5% was built into the terms of reference. And he said this morning, we are committed to spending what we need to deliver this review. He talks about unfunded promises. He knows about unfunded promises. His drone strategy was unfunded. It was 12 pages with more pictures than words. His munitions strategy was unfunded, and it was even unpublished. And his commitment, and his party's commitment to 2.5% on defence was never in government budgets. It was a gimmick launched 4 weeks before they called the election. They dither, we deliver. Mr Speaker, on the Diego Garcia, I'll just say this to the Shadow Defence Secretary. This deal is a great investment in the defence and intelligence base that we share with the Americans. It is essential for activities that cannot be undertaken elsewhere, that we do not undertake with any other nation. It is a deal worth 0.2% of the defence budget. The US backed the deal, NATO backs the deal, Five Eyes backed the deal, Australia backs the deal, India backs the deal. So how, on this national security issue, have the opposition got themselves on the wrong side? Mr. Speaker, as far as this SDR goes, this is the defence moment of a generation. With threats increasing, defence spending rising, we have now a plan for transformation. A plan that will link the best of advanced technology with the heavy metal of our platforms. A plan that will drive the defence dividend to increase jobs and business support across the country, and a plan that puts people in defence right at the heart of our defence plans for the future, with increased pay, better housing and better kit to do the job to deter our adversaries in the future.
Chairing the Select Committee, Tamanjit Singh Desi.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, given the growing instability in Europe and beyond, and the fact that, amongst other things, the UK is the third most targeted nation on the planet in terms of cyber attacks, I wholeheartedly welcome the government's intention to turn the tanker around and increase focus on defence. However, the SDR is only as effective as the SR that will follow this month. So, to ensure that this strategic defence review does not befall the same fate as some of its predecessors, how confident is my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, that his and the Prime Minister's ambitions will be fully matched with a completely corresponding ambitious strategic defence review?
So you stay.
My honourable friend raises quite rightly the scale and nature of increasing cyber attacks this country faces. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I was taken aback when I had the privilege of taking this job 10 months ago to find that in the last year, defence across the piece has been subject to over 90,000 cyber attacks that can be linked directly to other states. That's why in this SDR we pick up the recommendation to establish a new cyber command so that we can build on the pockets of excellence that are there across defence, and we can make sure that we are able more effectively both to defend and to use offensive cyber in order to deter those attacks in future. And in terms of the funding, let me just say to my honourable friend, it's an important moment for the government next week with the spending review, but the Prime Minister has settled the funding for defence. He did so in his statement in February. The Chancellor has already put an extra £5 billion into the defence budget this year. We will hit 2.5% of GDP 3 years before anybody expected us to. We have ambition to hit 3% in the next Parliament, and as the Prime Minister confirmed this morning, we will spend what is needed to deliver the vision of this strategic defence review over the next 10 years and beyond.
Ellen Morgan, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do thank the Defence Secretary for the advanced sight of his statement, but although I'm more than disappointed that I only received the SDR 2 hours ago at 3:30 after the journalists. Now, hearing the Prime Minister absolutely right, we have entered a new era, one defined by international instability, geopolitical conflicts and global uncertainty. Perhaps not since the end of the Cold War have we faced such a myriad of threats to our defence. A barbaric Russian imperialism under Putin threatening Ukraine's freedom and NATO security. A Trumpian White House defined by its total indifference and even antagonism towards the defence of Europe. And the rising threat posed by China, as well as regional pariah states like Iran and North Korea. Taken together, these threats pose a once-in-a-generation risk to our country's defence. Meeting generational risks will require making generational commitments. So I welcome the government's readiness to accept all the recommendations outlined in today's strategic defence review. It is frankly staggering, however, that we still do not have a clear answer to the vital question: where is the money coming from to fund these ambitions? It's a shopping list without the money to pay for it.
Exactly, well said.
The government has flip-flopped on whether we can expect defence spending to rise to 3% of GDP, the figure on which the proposals of the SDR are premised. Putting the cart before the horse on funding the nation's defence sends entirely the wrong message to Putin and our other adversaries. So will the Minister commit today to holding cross-party talks on how to reach 3%?
Yeah.
While I welcome the announcement of new funding for military housing and urgent repairs, fixing our recruitment crisis and doing right by our service personnel requires more than sticking plasters. Will the government legislate to require all military homes to be brought under the Decent Home Standard?
Yeah.
It's also desperately disappointing that despite having had 11 months to consider how to stem the decline of soldiers from the army, the government appears to have sat on its hands. The shameful decline in troop numbers has only continued on its watch. If the government is serious about delivering for Britain's defence, does the Minister agree with me that reversing the utterly reckless troop cuts overseen by the Conservatives must begin now?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome what she's had to say on Ukraine. She'll recognise the way that this government has been supported by all parties in this House for the steadfast support that we've provided to Ukraine in fighting Putin's illegal invasion. She will also recognise that since July, when this government was elected, we've stepped up still further that support for Ukraine. I hope she'll recognise the fact that we have also stepped up the leadership that the UK can offer on European security more widely. Stepping in to convene, and I chaired the first Ukraine support group after 26 meetings where the US led the way. That alongside the French, we are convening the 30-odd nations looking at planning for securing a long-term peace in Ukraine if a ceasefire can be secured. Madam Deputy, Mr. Speaker, this week at NATO, I will be continuing those discussions with defence ministers. On the SDR, this is a vision for the next 10 years and beyond. It can be delivered within the spending commitments this government has made. As the Prime Minister underlined this morning, they were baked into the terms of reference. They've been confirmed by the reviewers. And as he has said, we will spend what we need to deliver this spending review. And I am totally confident that we will meet the ambition of 3% in the next Parliament. On military homes, Mr. Speaker, she's right that for years the scandal of making the families of those who serve live in substandard homes, often mouldy and damp, with leaking roofs and doors. We can change that. We have acted to start to do that. For the first time this year, we have now bought back and we control 36,000 family military homes. For the first time, last month, we have set out a consumer charter with the basics of what people have to expect from the MOD as their landlord. And we have confirmed as well now an extra £1.5 billion over this Parliament that we will use to deal with the worst of military family homes, and we will be able to start also being able to develop long-term, building the homes we need both for our forces and more widely in the country, and use better the huge asset for this country that MOD land offers.
Dame Meg Hillier, Chair of the Treasury Committee.
Mr. Speaker, may I just use this moment to pay tribute to Lord Etherton, who died recently and whose review into the misjustice to LGBTQ+ veterans was enormous. I really welcome this review from the Secretary of State. I've been around long enough to see the words review, defence and strategic or modern or whatever in many, and as the Right Honourable Gentleman highlighted, the nadir was reached on the Right Honourable Member for Stone, Great Wyley and Penkridge in a report that had more pictures than text. But this report will only live if all members of this House agree that this is long-term, because as the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, it's the chopping and changing, stopping and starting of programmes that can cause often real problems for our men and women on the ground. Will the Secretary of State, does he agree with me, and what's he doing to try and make sure that we embed this for the long term?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome my right honourable friend's welcome for this SDR. I welcome her recognition that this is a strategic defence review. I welcome her recognition also that this recognises the threats that we face and maps out the framework within which we have to make the investment decisions in order to deliver that, in order to make our forces stronger and, of course, British people safer. Mr. Speaker, I will work with members of all parties across this House whenever this question of national security and the safety of our people is at stake. I welcome her support, and I welcome for her chairwomanship of the Treasury Select Committee, and hope that she may take an interest in that committee, in the fact that at the heart of this SDR, at the heart of our plans, is to make the defence investment, the record defence investment that this government is now making into this country, something that just does not reinforce our national security, but that can drive economic growth, that can bring a defence dividend, that can drive the mission of this government to increase the level of economic growth and bring jobs, business and new tech to every part of the country.
Part of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
History repeats itself. In 1935, we spent just 3% of national wealth on defence. Because we rearmed almost too late, we almost lost civilization, and by 1945, we were spending 52% of national wealth. Given that we are facing a crisis in Europe, an unparalleled Russian rearmament, almost as great as Germany in the 1930s, will the Secretary of State now do the right thing by history and commit to this House a firm commitment to 3.5%, not as an ambition, but by a set date?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised the right honourable gentleman, given the points he makes, has not welcomed two things. First of all, the historic increase in defence spending this government has already put in. An extra £5 billion in this, our first year in government alone. He'll remember when his party came to power in 2010, they cut defence spending by £2 billion in that year. But also the commitment and plan to increase spending to 2.5% in 2 years' time, and to 3% in the next Parliament, an ambition that I'm confident we will hit. Can I say to him this? If we are going to meet the challenges of the SDR, if we're going to meet the challenges of reinforcing our industrial base and our armed forces as he urges, he's right also to say that we can't do this alone. We don't do this alone. We're one of 32 nations in NATO. And so the second thing I'm surprised he won't welcome is the fact we now have agreed a security and defence partnership agreement with the European Union that is the first step potentially to allowing us to work with other European nations in the European Union and use some of the financing that may be available in Europe to do exactly as he urges us to.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will be under no doubt of just how proud we are in Barrow-in-Furness to be building the submarines that keep our nation safe. Yeah. The commitment to expanding this country's submarine programme with up to 12 SSN AUKUS boats to be built in our shipyard is the start of the next chapter in that illustrious career. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that defence spending under this Labour government means investment in British companies, in local supply chains and in the very fabric of our communities?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
I will indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is right. She's a strong champion for Barrow and for its shipyard. She will know that the investment programme that we have confirmed is about increasing the ability to produce more submarines more rapidly and to reach the point where we can look to design, build and launch a new submarine, a new attack submarine every 18 months. That will allow us to respond to the threats that we anticipate in 10, 20 years' time. It will allow us to meet our NATO commitments. And we will succeed in doing this to the extent that we have a government ready to invest and we have a town in Barrow and a supply chain across the whole of the United Kingdom of proud workers willing to lend their professional expertise to this production and this most important mission. Securing our nation's defences for the future, contributing to a stronger NATO, and also reinforcing our ability to generate jobs and prosperity, including in Barrow.
Lincoln Chop.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. When I worked on these in the Ministry of Defence, all defence reviews had up arrows and down arrows. And from what I've read in the brief time that we've had the defence review, it does seem a lot of up arrows. There's only one that I can really find, which is not extending dreadnoughts out of service date beyond 2050. Does the Secretary of State want to roll the pitch a bit and just indicate where capabilities might be de-emphasised or indeed lost?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a strategic defence review that sets out a vision and a framework for decisions over the next 10 years and beyond. It could only be delivered because of the increase in defence spending, the historic increase, the largest increase in defence spending this government has made since the end of the Cold War. That is the basis on which we'll make the decisions. That's the basis on which we will deliver the SDR's recommendations.
Alex Baker.
Deputy Speaker. It's a proud day for us in the home of the British Army to see Labour investing more in defence. More than we saw under 14 years of the Tory government. It's clear to me that we need more innovative financing solutions to support the new defence technologies set out in the SDR, such as the technologies being developed at Cody Business Park in Farnborough, which I visited this morning. Will the Secretary of State support my campaign for a multilateral defence, security and resilience bank to help power more investment, jobs and opportunities in Aldershot, Farnborough and right across the country?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she is proud of the government, she's proud of the SDR, and I have to say we are proud of her as the first Labour MP ever for the town of Aldershot, the home of the British Army, and she serves that community and she serves the Army with great distinction as the town's MP. She is also doing some extremely valuable work on how we start to make sure that we can match the significant increase in public investment, taxpayers' investment in our defence, with more private sources of investment. And I'm following the work that she's doing in developing those ideas very closely, and I'm looking at them very closely as well, as I know my right honourable friend the Chancellor is too.
Sir James Cleverly.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like many in the House, I've only had the chance to skim read the SDR. Fundamentally, it seems to be heading in the right direction. But why so timid? Why so slow? If, as the Right Honourable Gentleman says, we are facing an era-defining moment, then why not move with the pace that that era demands? Why not commit to 3% in a meaningful timescale to give industry and the forces some serious opportunity to plan and make this a document that is worth its name, rather than just a let's see how little we can get away with to keep the papers happy?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I reject that characterisation completely. I'm glad he recognises this is the SDR going in the right direction. It certainly is. He will therefore recognise it is a complete break from what the government that he was a leading member of less than a year ago was presiding over. 14 years hollowing out and underfunding our armed forces, and ended now. A defence with no vision for the future, that's ended now. A plan to make sure that we can bring the very best of innovative technology to reinforce the strength of our armed forces and the traditional hardware we've got, that ends now. The SDR will deliver that vision. We will deliver it.
Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This SDR underpins the reason why I left the Royal Air Force: to be part of a government that takes its commitment to defence and security seriously, and which brings about the end of hollowing out of our armed forces that took place under the last government. The measures taken within this SDR reverse fundamental and damaging delays that the previous government took within our defence programmes, supports our personnel and provides a clear and credible path to meeting the challenges presented to us by Russia. But in the words of General Barrons, the greatest threat to this SDR is in its delivery. So, can my right honourable friend provide us with an understanding of what measures are being put in place to ensure that we deliver the SDR and the defence proposition that underwrites our defence and our security and prosperity?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend and the contribution he makes to debates in this House and to the determination of the Labour government to deliver this SDR. I said in my opening remarks, there cannot be investment without reform, and from day one, reform was a top priority for me as Defence Secretary. It does not bring photo opportunities and front pages, but potentially it brings the results that we need in the future. So we have set up a military strategic headquarters. We have the Chief of the Defence Staff for the first time now commanding the chiefs. We have a new National Armaments Director. We have a single investment budget. We have budgetary control now that was not there before. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are the ways, the reforms in place, the further reforms we will drive that the SDR reinforces and endorses. This is the way that we give ourselves the best chance to deliver the vision set out by the reviewers so ably in the Strategic Defence Review report.
Madam Deputy Speaker, what is the difference between the Chancellor's black hole and the Defence Secretary accepting 62 recommendations from the SDR without committing the funds to pay for them?
Because the Prime Minister and the government have committed the funds. We've committed the funds. We built them into the terms of reference that allow this strategic defence review over the next 10 years and beyond to be delivered. That's the confirmed view of the reviewers. That's exactly what my job now as Defence Secretary will be to do.
Fred Thomas.
Speaker, and I strongly welcome the Secretary of State's support and his leadership in this time of increased threats. We saw over the weekend that Ukraine have managed to destroy, they say, as many as 40 Russian bombers deep inside Russia. That's at a value, they would say, of £5 billion, which is almost as much as we are raising the defence budget by. So we have to get after innovation, and this SDR does that. In particular, I wanted to ask the Secretary of State about page 59, talking about rapid commercial exploitation quickly. It mentions pulling the latest technology into operations, unlocking private equity and venture capital. My question is this: do we need to change the commercial competition laws within the civil service to allow that to happen, or can it already happen?
We certainly have to change the procurement system. And the Chancellor and I have already announced at the spring statement the way that we will ensure that the sort of innovation that my honourable friend talks about can move from to contract far faster than we've done before, and that we can make sure that the sort of spiral development that the Shadow Defence Secretary first started to look at in government can actually be pursued and put in place. We will do that. It's part of the procurement reforms that we are bringing in place, because pace, as well as new innovation and new companies that have so much to offer, are part of how we do this in the future.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say that Mark Rutte, head of NATO, the last few days said that all NATO nations must achieve 3.5% of GDP on defence spending. Now, I heard the right honourable gentleman, a man, by the way, I respect a lot, and he's known me for a long time in this House. I simply say to him, when he said on Saturday, there is no doubt the UK defence spending will rise by 3% by 2034, I nodded in approval and thought, great, they've got a commitment. By Sunday, that appears not to be the case. Can I say to him, nobody here wants this Strategic Defence Review to succeed more than I do, having sat in here and never agreed with the idea of the peace dividend from start to finish. Russia, China, North Korea and Iran are all seen as threats inside this. So will he now, please, get to the dispatch box, as the character that he is, and say, to achieve this, we will need at least 3%, if not more, and this government will be committed to spending it.
Secretary of State.
I'd say to the right honourable gentleman, look, don't take it from me at the dispatch thoughts this afternoon. Take it from the Prime Minister when he said, we will spend what is needed to deliver this review. He's made that commitment in the House. He's made that commitment today. It is the vision of this strategic defence review that becomes now the mission of this government to deliver.
Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Much of the new hardware pledged today won't be delivered for some years and won't be effective without the personnel to operate it. So I ask the Secretary of State, what more will the government do today, right now, not in 2034, to ensure our armed forces are recruiting those service personnel that these long-term plans will rely on?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is right. In many ways, defence is a special case. Many of the decisions we need to take now in order to secure the future of future generations, in order to develop and secure the capabilities we will need in order to do that in 10, 20 and 30 years' time. And he's also right that it's the people that are at the heart of this. In terms of recruiting into the armed forces, he'll recognise the 14 years of failure and the recruitment and retention crisis that we were left with last summer. He will know that I've removed over 100 of the rules that prevented some people from applying to join the forces. He will know that I've introduced a direct entry for those with cyber talent to join and contribute to our defences. And he will recognise also that we are looking to retain those who are valuable to us, paying better, looking to upgrade the housing, and where needed, special retention payments to deal with it. This is going to take time. We're closing the gap, but I'm determined that we will reverse that long-term decline. And for the first time, this is a government that wants to increase, not see a further cut in the size of our army.
Emma Lewell.
This review is welcome. Where the last government hollowed out our armed forces, we are rebuilding. Russia's Northern Fleet and China's Polar Silk Road ambitions have seen both countries focus and cooperate in the High North. As the framework nation for the JEF, the UK has limited surface fleet capable of operating in the polar ice. Can my right honourable friend confirm if the new hybrid navy will see this capability scaled up?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can, and I can also say to my honourable friend, she plays an important part in debates in this House, including on the Defence Select Committee. She recognises that, as we can see from Ukraine, and as we can see from Ukraine, it is the nations that are able to bring together the innovation, the rapid innovation in new technology, with the hardware of established weaponry and platforms that will have the combat edge in the future. I'm determined that Britain will be at the leading edge of innovation in NATO, that our forces will be better equipped in the future, and that we will reform and rebuild our British industry to be able to equip them for exactly that.
John Clare.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the aspirations of this strategic defence review. And I welcome the statement on page 7 where it says we will develop a new defence investment plan. But as the Secretary of State knows, through all the budgets and fiscal events that he sat through, he cannot give this House a categorical assurance over future spending commitments. So I would ask him that he makes clear to this House what decisions he is prepared to make with respect to the existing commitments such that he can secure that additional funding at subsequent spending reviews and budgets. And I do hope that when he does come clean completely to this House, he will make clear that there will be considerable ongoing investment at DSTL at Porton Down, because they do an enormous amount to secure the future understanding of future technologies in the defence arena.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the delivery of the SDR vision can only be done because of the commitment to increase defence spending this government has made. The defence investment plan is a new investment framework, a new investment programme, developed in the context and defined by this SDR vision. The work on that new investment plan will be completed and published in the autumn.
Chianwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And there's much in this Strategic Defence Review which will be of interest to my committee, but I welcome the report, and in particular the recognition that science, innovation and technology are both an opportunity as well as a threat. Can he confirm that the numerous references to AI in the report are to a sovereign AI capability, whether publicly or privately developed? And Madam Deputy Speaker, having spent last week in Brunei as part of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, observing the amazing work of the Royal Gurkha Rifles, will he also confirm that despite this tilt back to NATO, he recognises the contribution and strategic importance of this base in the South China Seas?
Secretary of State.
Madam Speaker, my honourable friend is right. The NATO-first approach at the heart of this strategic defence review and the heart of this government's commitment to our collective deterrence and defence in the Euro-Atlantic is NATO first, but it's not NATO only. And so alliances and partnerships such as GCAP or AUKUS, partnerships that we have with other nations remain important. On the question of innovation and the British base, she will recognise that as part of warfighting readiness, we require an industrial readiness. And that industrial readiness, that industrial deterrence that is part of preventing our adversaries from considering attacks against us, means that our companies must be able to innovate, they must be able to scale up production if we're faced with conflicts in the future. And that will be, if you like, a touchstone for the way that we will take many of the decisions as we invest in the future.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This Defence Review gives us a long shopping list of technological advances: the Cyber Command, digital backbone, drones, AI, and this is right and proper. But the British military is tiny. Recently, the Select Committee heard that if we had to fight tonight, we could scratch together 5 ships and 30 planes. And the person who told us this was the former head of the MOD's own Strategic Net Assessment Office. So would the Secretary of State agree that the lesson from Ukraine is actually that to fight and win wars, you need to have a mass of force, a large force with tech that is good enough, rather than a small, perfectly formed, high-tech force? And is this lesson being heeded in the review?
Short answer, yes. Longer answer, we do not fight alone. We do not plan to fight alone. We are a leading member of NATO, the 32-strong alliance that's never been bigger, never been stronger. And as we approach the NATO summit later this month, there will be a discussion about the capabilities that each of the nations contributes and develops in the years ahead, so that we can strengthen that collective deterrence, we can avoid the wars that we don't want to fight, and we can also strengthen our collective and our UK defence.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Anyone who heard Carsten Breuer, Germany's Chief of Defence, speak at the weekend will have found his words deeply sobering. So can I congratulate my right honourable friend on the SDR, modernising our defence from Atlantic bastion